Chapter 26:13. Between experts of the same level, there was no need for any pretense. One sentence was enough to poke the nail in the coffin. Everyone was extremely honest, without the slightest bit of falsehood. Xie Danxiong stood quietly and didn't speak for a long time. Dong Huang didn't speak either, and walked towards his destination. He was about to pass by Xie Danxiong. Xie Danxiong suddenly said quietly, "Dong Huang, that promise has become my inner demon." Shui Leihan suddenly stopped in his tracks. Dong Huang had thought that there was nothing in the world that could stop him. But he stopped because of this sudden sentence. Inner demon. Inner demon. If the inner demon wasn't removed, it meant that there was no way forward. Xie Danxiong didn't turn around. The two of them just stood facing each other side by side. You faced the south, I faced the north. Both of their faces were exactly the same. Dong Huang, my cultivation has improved greatly, and I've already broken through to the Jasper Flower realm. Xie Danxiong said the second sentence quietly. Then he said softly, I've already broken through to the Jasper Flower realm. Dong Huang Shui Leihan was silent. I won't lose, Xie Danxiong said, because what I use is also a hidden weapon, and the arrow god's arrow is nothing more than a hidden weapon. If you were to fight in this battle, the best result would be the death of the arrow god, and you being seriously injured. Then, your cultivation would drop, and you would never recover. Xie Danxiong said quietly, I've been thinking about that battle on that day. Since that time, I've been searching for Dong Huang's way of fighting, imitating it and integrating it into my martial arts. At our level, there's no need to be obsessed with any move. Which move? I'll take your place to feel that battle. I can feel that you can undoubtedly kill the arrow god. However, your cultivation base and cultivation realm will drop by at least 80%. And you'll never recover. To yourself, to your family, to the country, to the world, to the heavenly palace, there are all kinds of disadvantages and no advantages. The only two who will benefit are the saint and the heavenly devil clan that's about to arrive. Xie Danxiong finally took a step back and faced Dong Huang. He looked straight into his eyes. Compared to you, I'm still half a step behind you. I'm not as good as you. If we were to fight head-on, I might not be able to defeat the enemy that you can defeat in the end. I can easily deal with a hidden weapon expert like the archer god, but you may not. In the path of martial arts, there were mutual engendering and restraining each other. Purely relying on strength to crush others, and using strength to break through all techniques might not be suitable for those of the same level of strength. I believe Dong Huang understands this much better than I do. Why force yourself? Xie Danxiong said quietly. This is the truth. I believe that you won't go against your conscience and deny it. Now that the great battle of Tian Ke is imminent, I, Xie Danxiong, am confident that I can recover even if I am injured in the battle. But you've engaged in a completely unnecessary battle here, and you've even suffered unnecessary injuries. You will never be able to recover. Such a brainless method is really unwise. Xie Danxiong said in a deep voice. My words are undoubtedly unpleasant to hear. However, in the end, there was only one meaning. You are stronger than me. However, when it comes to this battle, you are inferior to me. So let me fight in your place. I will get rid of my inner demons, and you will preserve your strength for the future. There's one more thing. I'm confident that I can make the archer god retreat in the face of difficulties, and still preserve his strength and life. Can you do it? If you fight, you will only kill him, Xie Danxiong said. Shui Leihan frowned and pondered. After a long time he asked softly, Xie Danxiong, do you really have an inner demon? Xie Danxiong was stunned. He raised his head and looked at Dong Huang. Dong Huang also looked at him quietly. The two of them suddenly burst into laughter at the same time. If there were outsiders here, they would definitely be scared out of their wits. Because in front of them were clearly two majesties of the Dong Huang, laughing heartily at each other. South Forest. It was completely silent. The fierce wind blew the treetops, and the whole forest unexpectedly made a sound like a tsunami. The archer god, dressed in white, stood on the treetop of the tallest tree. Or rather, it was not accurate to say that it was the treetop, because the archer god was only standing on the topmost tree. The surrounding trees were all blown askew by the strong wind, But this tree was the only one that didn't move a single inch. Even the tree was completely still. He stood quietly with his eyes half closed, waiting quietly. Waiting for the opponent to come. Dong Huang would definitely come. The surrounding thousands of miles of land had already been covered by his divine sense. Other than Dong Huang Shueleihan, who could enter without any obstruction, no one else could. Even the Tian Ke saint wouldn't be able to sneak in without alerting the archer god. In this battle, the archer god only wanted one thing: fairness. He would not allow anyone to interfere with this battle. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and looked towards the northeast. For a moment, the wind and clouds gathered in the sky. A long howl broke through the air, suppressing the fierce wind and the whistling of the whole forest. South Forest, the scenery is indeed good. In a flash, Dong Huang's figure had already appeared in midair. He said elegantly, "Brother Archer God, the battle between you and me here is enough to be passed down as a much-told tale." The Archer God said coldly, "The hatred between us covers the sky. How can there be a much-told tale?" Dong Huang smiled and said, "Brother Archer God, aren't you a little too anxious? The battle hasn't started yet. I'm afraid it won't do you any good." The few words before the battle were just passing through the door. Both of them knew this. At this moment there was nothing to say. However, words could damage the opponent's morale. Perhaps a sentence, intentionally or unintentionally, could disturb the opponent's state of mind, which was enough to affect the outcome of this battle. At this point he had finished speaking. The archer god did not speak anymore, because he knew that even if he spoke again, he would not be able to gain anything. This Shueleihan was so magnanimous from the very start, and her reply was indeed a little too narrow-minded. Therefore he was ready to attack. His gaze suddenly focused, and his entire person seemed to have disappeared from this world. He was clearly still here. However, the feeling that he gave off was gone. Dong Huang laughed loudly and retreated. In an instant, he had already retreated 300 feet away. He smiled and said, "Archer God, the South Forest is full of greenery. This is equivalent to your home ground. Unleash your full strength completely. Don't disappoint me." The archer god's gaze flickered. He looked at Shueleihan with some surprise. 300 feet. This distance was neither close nor far. To deal with an ordinary expert, or even an ordinary expert at the peak of the saint level, this distance was definitely enough. If it was a little further, the archer god was also confident that he could kill with one arrow. However, to deal with Dong Huang, it was not enough. It was far from enough. This distance was really a very subtle one. Besides, this was an absolutely safe distance for him. The archer god understood. This distance was definitely not a distance that ordinary people could comprehend. Only experts at the peak of the saint level could comprehend it. Moreover, only those who had reached the peak of the saint level in terms of secret weapons, at least close to his level, could accurately grasp it. This safe distance. If others were standing too far away, then there would be more chances for his arrow to change midway. As long as there was a chance for change, there would naturally be countless chances of killing with one arrow. Or if they were standing too close, of course, the path of his arrow would be relatively fixed. However, if the distance was closer, it would instead increase the chances of killing with one arrow. After all, the arrow was a weapon that relied more on speed. The shorter the distance, the more threatening it was. However, 300 feet was an extremely subtle distance. To an expert of his level, especially when facing an expert like Shueleihan, it was truly a distance that was close to helplessness. No matter whether it was advancing or not, whether it was retreating, it would give the other party a considerable amount of initiative. However, if he were to immediately attack now, he would only lose his edge, and it would be difficult to achieve anything. That day when they first faced each other, they were just testing each other's skills. Shueleihan did not do so, because he obviously did not realize it. Why did he suddenly become so smart today? There was no room for optimism in today's battle. In the distance, Shueleihan's hands were empty. With a swipe of the air, a shiny sword suddenly appeared in his hands. Dong Huang lowered his head and stared at the blade. He said lightly, "Archer God, you are the one who challenged me in today's battle. You shall make the first move." "I, Shueleihan, have never taken advantage of others, and made the first move in my entire life." The archer god almost cursed. "Pfft, you make it sound nice. If you make the first move, I will instead have increased the chances of killing you. Because as long as you attack me, the distance between the two of us will change. But you actually let me make the first move. If I had the confidence to make the first move, would I still need you to call for me? Are you trying to trick me?" Acting all sanctimonious and well-behaved, however, the other party's aura was already rapidly condensing and increasing at an unprecedented speed. The wind and clouds in the sky surged. Clouds from all directions came whistling like thousands of galloping horses, then whistling away, then whistling back again. The archer god roared and finally made the first move. The light of the arrows was like lightning, instantly filling the sky. Luohua City, Heavenly Armament Pavilion. "They are fighting." Zi Xieching looked at the sky on the other side and clapped her hands subconsciously. Finally, she could truly heave a sigh of relief. They were fighting and Xie Danxiong was still within her control. There was nothing to worry about. Zi Xieching was not worried at all about Dong Huang's battle. With Dong Huang's earth-shattering cultivation, he would at most be slightly injured. His life would not be in danger. However, if Xie Danxiong were to fight, the nature and consequences would be greatly different. Even though Xie Danxiong's cultivation had improved greatly, he was still a hair's breadth away from Dong Huang. In a battle between peak experts, a hair's breadth could determine life and death. For Dong Huang, it might be a Pyrrhic victory, but for Xie Danxiong, it was very likely that he would be defeated and killed. Therefore, Zi Xieching could finally rest assured when she saw that the battle had finally started. Speaking of which, Zi Xieching was not completely unworried and unconcerned about Dong Huang. Dong Huang treated Zi Xieching like his own daughter, and cared for her in every way. Zi Xieching would not go so far as to treat Xue Leihan like a father, but she still felt a little close to him. Chapter 26:14. But this time, it involved her husband and her brother. She had to eliminate the possible disaster before it sprouted. Besides, Zi Xieching had complete confidence in Dong Huang. Dong Huang would never lose. No matter who it was. "Let's go. To the confinement room. Let's go take a look at that guy. There shouldn't be any problem if we let him out now. Things have already been settled. It seems like we can't win the argument if we don't let him out now." Zi Xieching was all smiles as she led the way. At the door of the confinement room, Zi Xieching was stunned. When he opened the door, he only saw a few twisted dragon tendons lying on the ground. They were like a few extremely tired snakes curled up and resting. There was no one in the confinement room. As for Xie Danxiong, he was long gone. It was empty. Zi Xieching was stunned at the scene in front of her. After a long while she finally roared, "Where is he?" The guard in charge of the confinement room fainted in fright the moment he saw it. "Master Xie Danxiong, you're really my master. This master has really screwed us over." But this master's meridians and blood vessels were all controlled just now. All of his cultivation was sealed. Even his divine sense and divine soul were all locked. His body was also wrapped around by 7 or 8 dragon tendons. The dragon tendons were all tightly knotted. How could he escape from such a confinement? This was simply a miracle. There were no traces of the door being opened, no traces of the lock being touched, no windows in the confinement room, and no traces of the room being destroyed. But the person locked inside was gone. Inconceivable, incomprehensible, inconceivable miracle. Zi Xieching stood there for a long while. Slowly she finally understood. Her face was as white as jade. Her face was flushed red with embarrassment and anger. She stomped her feet fiercely. "Xie Danxiong, how dare you lie to me?" She finally understood. Xie Danxiong's purpose of coming here was not to ask for her help at all, but to absolve her of the responsibility. Because Xie Danxiong was still battling in the Demon Emperor Heaven. No matter what, Zi Xieching could not avoid this matter. No matter if Xie Danxiong won or lost, Zi Xieching would have to face the blame of her brothers. "Why didn't you stop him? Don't you know how dangerous this matter is?" Even though he wouldn't say it out loud, he had such thoughts. Zi Xieching would feel it. At that time, it would be very difficult for her to make a choice. Or rather, it could be said that she had no choice. It would be even worse if Xie Danxiong were to die here. Xi Xiecheng probably didn't have the face to face Chu Yang and his brothers anymore. Therefore, it was impossible for Xi Xiecheng to let him go. She would even capture him personally. Confining himself would cut off the possibility of him going to war. In view of this, Xie Danxiong simply took the initiative to deliver himself to the enemy's doorstep. I'll take the initiative to ask for your help. Then, I'll let you capture and detain me. Then he would spread the news of I'm very safe. This would prove that he had tried his best to stop them. Moreover, he had used extreme measures. But if I escape by myself after that, then no matter what happens, it will be my own decision. It has nothing to do with you at all. I did stop them, and I even thought that I had stopped them. But you still managed to escape. If something really happened to you, even if they could understand me and forgive me, could I really understand myself? Forgive myself? Young Xie, you must come back, you must. Xi Xiecheng smiled bitterly. She looked up at the sky, where the wind and thunder were already raging. The battle over there had already begun. There was no way to stop them anymore. Just as Xi Xiecheng thought earlier, the matter was already settled. There was no point in making any more futile efforts. She could only let out a long sigh. Xie Danxiong, you're really something. Xi Xiecheng sighed in her heart. But she also heaved a sigh of relief. Xie Danxiong had been able to escape from this place in such a bad situation. And he hadn't been able to detect it until he had seen it with his own eyes. This undoubtedly proved that Xie Danxiong's cultivation had surpassed his own at the very least, because it was absolutely impossible for him to break such a restriction without at least 3 days of time. And the most important thing was that if Xie Danxiong wanted to impersonate Xue Leihan to fight, he must first get East Sovereign's consent. If it was really a death trap, East Sovereign would definitely not agree. And since East Sovereign had agreed, Xie Danxiong definitely had the power to fight. At the very least, there would be no risk of death. Thinking of this, Xi Xiecheng was slightly relieved. Divine Spirit, follow me to the southern forest at full speed to watch the battle. Meng Wuya, immediately pass on the news of Xie Danxiong, replacing East Sovereign to the Tianji Intelligence Department. Let them inform Mo Tianji as soon as possible. Xi Xiecheng flew up. In an instant, she had already turned into a ray of white light. The divine soul of calamity also followed him silently. Xu Yang and the rest hastened their journey. Even though they knew that Xie Danxiong was very safe now, they were still worried about East Sovereign's safety. Therefore, they did not slow down at all, and rushed at full speed. They were already close to the Demon Emperor Heaven. The Demon Emperor Heaven is in front. Xu Yang was a little relieved. And Luohua City is not in the central area. If we rush there from here, I believe we will reach our destination soon. Hearing Xu Yang say so, everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, they were almost there. This whole journey was really exhausting. However, at this moment, Mo Tianji, who had been paying attention to the latest news, said, "The battle between East Sovereign and the Archer God has officially begun." Everyone was shocked, but they all felt that it was a pity. It's a pity that we couldn't be there to watch such a battle of the century. What a pity. That's right. This is an extremely rare battle. If we miss it this time, we might not have another chance. It's really a pity. Everyone was discussing and sighing. Although they were not far from the battlefield, it would still take some time to get there. Even if they managed to get there, they might not be able to see anything exciting. Anyway, the battle had already started. Since they were destined not to make it in time, and during this battle, everyone and all the forces would pay full attention to it. It would definitely attract everyone's attention. They believed that nothing major would happen in the outside world. Then why would they rush and be so tired? Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. But Mo Tianji suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my God! This is bad. What's wrong? Why are you making such a fuss?" Xu Yang and the rest frowned and asked. These few days, Mo Tianji was shocked 3 times a day. This was definitely not his usual self. Could it be that Xi Xiecheng had tortured Xie Danxiong again? Xie Danxiong is missing. Mo Tianji's lips were trembling. He used some unknown method to escape from the confinement room where sister-in-law imprisoned him. Now the one fighting in southern heaven forest is most likely not Donghuang Shueleihan, but Xie Danqiong, who insisted on fighting on her behalf. When this news came out, all the brothers were dumbfounded. What's going on? Didn't they say that sister-in-law had subdued Xie Danqiong and imprisoned him completely? Why is there a change now? He has already gone to the battle, and the battle has already started. It's like this, Mo Tianji hurriedly explained as he hurried on. After he finished explaining, everyone was furious and couldn't control themselves. Xie Danqiong is too much. How can he do this? Beat him up when we see him. Bastard. He's just a bastard. Chu Yang frowned and said worriedly, Xie Danqiong is most likely not a match for the archer god now. The archer god was not at a disadvantage when he fought with Donghuang previously. Xie Danqiong is fighting on Donghuang's behalf. I'm afraid his life will be in danger. Shueleihan, this bastard, why? Let's go quickly and hurry to the location of the battle. The brothers didn't waste any more words, and immediately increased their speed to the maximum. He's really born to be tired. GMO and Luo Kudi sighed. This Xie Danqiong has become more and more cunning ever since he became the Heavenly Emperor. This time he actually deceived sister-in-law. When we meet later, let's join forces to beat him up. This time, it's most likely not our turn. Luo Kudi was not confident. Didn't you see how Boss and Mo Tianji looked like they wanted to eat him up? I'm afraid that no matter whether Xie Danqiong wins or loses this time, he's doomed in Boss's hands. Just based on the fact that he deceived sister-in-law, Boss will definitely not let him off. He deserves it if he doesn't let him off. Sigh. Nothing should happen, right? Definitely not. It definitely won't. Xie Danqiong is in our group. No one can compare to him in terms of hidden weapons. Even if he can't win, he can always escape. This is a decisive battle, you idiot. And he's representing Donghuang, not himself. Donghuang's face is also on him. No matter if he loses or escapes, Donghuang can't afford to lose this face. Since he's representing Donghuang to fight, he has to bear this responsibility. What the fuck, isn't it like that? That means he can only fight head-on. If he can't win, he can't run. This is not easy to handle. Let's hurry. Everyone was burning with anxiety as they rushed away. In the sky above the southern sky forest, there were already several people watching the battle. Below, the battle between the two parties involved in this battle of the century had already reached a white-hot level. The outcome could be decided at any time. The reason why it was like this was because the battle mode of these two people was very different from ordinary decisive battles. Separated by about 3,000 feet or so, the two parties launched their attacks. Occasionally, Donghuang would rush forward and retreat in an instant. In between, they were as fast as lightning and as fast as a white steed. The two people's attacks, methods, positions, the cultivation that they displayed, their experience, their precise judgment, and so on. All of them made the onlookers gasp in amazement. Do I still have monthly votes? Chapter 26:15. I was too focused on exploding and wrote the wrong chapter name. The first 820 chapters should be 810. 21 should be 20. This chapter is the real 821. But I can't change the chapter name. I can only apologize here. It's my negligence. Even the Saint Monarchs and the Demon Empress, who were watching the battle, were dazzled by it as they exclaimed in surprise. This was a battle that was completely different from any other battle in the history of the Heaven Imperial Court. However, the danger involved in this battle was far more than any other battle in the history of the Heaven Imperial Court. The two of them were walking between life and death at any time. They were wandering between victory and defeat at any time, going to the entrance of the netherworld and back again. However, the strangest thing was that the two of them had never engaged in close combat since the beginning. It was so strange. Another arrow pierced through the air. Donghuang also moved forward almost at the same time. His sword aura surged for 3,000 feet and pierced through the arrow god. However, he immediately realized that the arrow god that was pierced through was actually a tree. The real arrow god had already drawn his bow and arrow in another direction. Just as the archer god was about to complete his attack, Donghuang had already retreated 300 feet away, like a stream of light. He was fully prepared for the next wave of attack. The arrow god's arrows and Donghuang's sword intertwined in the air to form a huge net. The intensity of the attacks even made the people outside unable to see what was going on inside. The huge net that covered an area of 3,000 feet was unimaginably fine. Beside the demon empress, an ordinary-looking person sighed slightly and transmitted a message. The winner is about to be decided. Xiedanqiong won. The demon empress also nodded slightly. If it was me, I definitely wouldn't use such a battle method. But I have to admit, perhaps this was the only way to defeat the archer god in a head-on battle, while suffering limited damage. Other than that, there's no better way except for both sides suffering. This is the only way to ensure the safety of both sides. This ordinary-looking commentator was the real Donghuang Shueleihan. The demon empress nodded. He also transmitted his voice. In this battle, the archer god made a mistake because he fell into a fixed state of mind. This was because he had always believed that the person standing opposite him was Donghuang. He had no idea who the person in front of him was. He is a concealed weapon expert who is not inferior to him. This is a fundamental mistake. How can he not be defeated? Shueleihan nodded in agreement. Indeed, for the past millions of years, the god of archery's secret weapon skills have been recognized as the best in the imperial court. No one had ever been able to catch up to him. But from today onwards, this number one in the imperial court of heaven would become two people who were neck to neck. Moreover, Xiedanqiong was much younger than him. He still had a lot of room for development in the future. However, the archer god's skill had already reached its limit. I don't have the strength to advance any further. The demon empress smiled and said, that is destined. Actually, after this battle, Xiedanqiong will be able to suppress the arrow god. That was because the archer god had gone through millions of battles in his life. However, this was the first time in Xiedanqiong's life that he was facing such a hidden weapon expert. It's true that both of them have comprehended something, but Xiedanqiong must have comprehended more. However, in this battle, it's still unavoidable that both of them will suffer. Shueleihan said, this is unavoidable. Their strengths are similar, and their battle styles are similar. It's inevitable that both of them will suffer. However, they won't suffer from irrecoverable injuries. This is already extremely rare and commendable. The demon empress sighed. However, her voice was already filled with gratification. However, at this moment, another unforeseen event occurred. Donghuang, who was in the middle of the battle, suddenly let out a long howl. With a smile, he said calmly, Brother Archer God, you've already shot me thousands of arrows. Now it's time for you to see my secret weapon skills. The archer god's pupil shrank. He said, no wonder Donghuang could use such skills to contend with me until now. It turns out that your majesty is also a hidden weapon expert. Donghuang, who was opposite him, said in a low voice, I also know that you haven't shot your strongest arrow yet. Today's battle between you and me will definitely have a winner. For this last strike, I'll give you an advantage. We'll use our secret weapon to determine the winner. At this point, the archer god's expression finally changed. Using his secret weapon to determine the winner. This advantage given by Donghuang was not small at all. At this moment, the archer god finally understood the fundamental reason why he had been unable to achieve anything, and even had his hands tied. He had only treated him as Donghuang, but not as Shueleihan. An emperor, who ruled over a part of the world, would always have the grandeur of an emperor. Even when fighting with others, he would definitely not use his secret weapon to attack. However, martial artists did not have this restriction. Donghuang was an emperor, but Shueleihan was a martial artist. The other party had always known his trump card. But he only understood his bottom line at the end when the other party said, using his secret weapon to determine the winner. As the ruler of a part of the world, Donghuang was actually a secret weapon expert who was not inferior to him. Since the other party dared to say that he would use his secret weapon to determine the winner with the archer god, who had been famous for 1,000,000 years, then he must be a top-level secret weapon expert. There was no doubt about this. He actually did not know such important information until now. He had actually lost the initiative right from the start. Before the battle even started, he was already destined to lose. Such a situation made the archer god feel inexplicably aggrieved. The other party knew himself and his enemy, and handled the battle with ease. However, he was kept in the dark from the start. If he did not lose this battle, then it would be really unreasonable. The archer god instantly wanted to adjust. However, Dong Huang did not intend to give him this chance. The long sword in Dong Huang's hand suddenly waved violently, and then it left his hand. This throw in anyone's eyes was nothing out of the ordinary. However, because of this sudden throw, the archer god tensed up from head to toe. He did not dare to be negligent. He did not dare to hesitate. He did not dare to be negligent. He suddenly pulled the green longbow, and the aura around him actually exploded at this moment. When the archer god shot his arrow, no one could see where the arrow was. This was the consensus of the Heaven Imperial Court. No one could be an exception to this. In fact, including today's battle, before the archer god shot the last arrow, no one could see every arrow he shot. No one could. No one was an exception. But now this arrow, this last arrow, was completely different. But everyone could see it clearly. The bowstring was clearly pulled, the bow was clearly drawn, and the arrow was clearly shot out slowly. No one thought that the archer god's most powerful arrow was this arrow that could be clearly seen. It was not those invisible arrows. This arrow was the archer god's trump card, his strongest skill, and his ultimate skill. Everyone felt that they had been forcibly pulled out of this space, and watched the arrow slowly move forward. This arrow was shot out, and the southern sky forest within a radius of 10,000 feet was blown askew by the strong wind. It was completely still in an instant. It maintained the state of being blown by the wind a moment ago, messy and still. On the other side, Dong Huang's sword had also been thrown out. Just as Dong Huang made his move, the sword that was thrown out split into two. 2 into 4, 4 into 8, 8 into 10, 32, 14. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky was filled. Opposite the countless long swords in the sky, an arrow was coming. Even if there are thousands of swords, I will definitely pierce through. This arrow gathered all of the archer god's essence, energy, and spirit, and all of his cultivation. All of it. After realizing that Dong Huang was also a concealed weapon expert, he immediately threw everything aside. Almost as if he had become a Buddha on the spot, he shot out the ultimate arrow without any distractions, body and mind. Wind and thunder surged. Only, the mountain of swords that Dong Huang had sent out was already covering his head. One arrow against 10,000 swords. Outside, everyone clearly heard a tremor. That sound. It seemed to resound in the depths of the soul. Then an unprecedented explosion occurred at the critical moment. The entire southern sky forest was blasted into the air by the power of the ultimate collision of two great powerhouses. Empty. Two muffled groans sounded at the same time. On Dong Huang's shoulder, a clear bloody hole appeared, connecting the front and back. On the opposite side, the archer god also had a short sword stuck in his right chest. The two were still separated by 10,000 feet, standing face to face. Suddenly they laughed at the same time. This battle is really satisfying. These words came from the mouths of the two facing each other at the same time. The injuries of the two men were not light at all. In fact, they were very serious. However, at the time of the explosion, no one knew when the two of them had been injured. I lost this battle. The archer god's expression was somewhat disappointed, and he said softly, Dong Huang. As expected of Dong Huang, you can actually defeat me in my strongest field. For the elves who had always been arrogant, personally admitting defeat was simply worse than death. At this moment, the archer god's mood could be imagined. There is no winner or loser in this battle. On the opposite side, Dong Huang smiled faintly. Everyone is tied. The archer god flew into a rage. You think I can't afford to lose? A win is a win, a loss is a loss. I don't know if you can afford to lose, but in any case, I really can't afford to lose. On the opposite side, Dong Huang said softly. Otherwise, you wouldn't only know that I'm Dong Huang. I was lucky to have this advantage, and this battle was even more lucky to win. So it's only right that we are tied. Hearing this, the archer god was stunned for a moment. Then he suddenly burst into laughter. A loss is a loss, no matter the reason. I only know that you are Dong Huang, but I neglected your true self, which is already a huge mistake. How can I not lose? Ha ha ha. But this time, I lost quite comfortably, not at all unconvinced. In the face of Xue Leihan's super open and above-board demeanor, the archer god suddenly felt that the person in front of him was actually very pleasing to the eye. This irreconcilable enemy was pleasing to the eye. At this moment, Dong Huang opposite him said, "Brother archer god, since the battle is over, I can officially tell you now." Chapter 26:16. His body floated up into the air. With a warm smile, he said softly, "Actually, there's no need for a battle between you and me, because there's no reason for a battle between us." He didn't say, "I didn't do it," nor did he say, "You were deceived." But there was no need for a battle. There was no reason for a battle. But it was equivalent to saying everything. The archer god shuddered. His eyes widened and he shouted, "Make yourself clear." But Dong Huang had already flown thousands of feet to the front of the demon empress. Then the white clouds surged and shrouded everyone. Not a single figure could be seen. Then, the white clouds surrounded a few people and started to float backward. The archer god's gaze suddenly became extremely complicated. He understood the meaning of Xue Leihan's words, but it was because he understood that he felt uncomfortable and lost. What the hell was going on? The archer god was a fairy. Fairies were pure, simple, and honest, but it didn't mean that they were all fools. Looking at Xue Leihan leaving quickly, the archer god suddenly roared, "Dong Huang!" He flew up like lightning and chased after him. In the clouds, Xie Danxiong and Xue Leihan had quickly exchanged identities. Seeing the archer god chasing after him with the short sword still in his chest, he didn't care at all. Xue Leihan sighed softly. "Danxiong, I'm afraid that your words have provoked him too much. Don't let it backfire." Xie Danxiong said calmly, "Even if it backfires, it's none of your business. What I do and say has nothing to do with you. What matters is my boss's reputation." Hearing that, Xue Leihan could only smile bitterly. Yes, Xue Leihan could only smile bitterly when Xie Danxiong answered with such a reason. Suddenly, he was filled with emotions. He said softly, "Back then, someone once slandered me. Zihao fought against the world in a fit of rage because of this. Back then, Zihao and Ling Piaoping's interracial marriage attracted the world's attention. The demon race and the human race boycotted it together. I, Xue Leihan, also stood up at that time to protect my brother's happiness." Xue Leihan looked far away. He said softly, "Xie Danxiong, do you know? I, Xue Leihan, only have one brother like this. But the two of you have many. Do you know? Such a pair of brothers. Since time immemorial, in this starry sky, there has been no one more than you." Xie Danxiong smiled proudly. "But we both think that it's worth it. Isn't that enough? No matter what he did, as long as it's for my brothers, I think it's worth it." This was the other reason why Xie Danxiong had to replace Dong Huang this time. It was also the most important reason. No one can slander my big brother like this. If there were, then kill them. Without pity. If the elven archer god believed Xie Danxiong's explanation of his identity as the Emperor of the East this time, that way, he would be able to avoid a future massacre. Otherwise, it was only because of Chu Yang's illegitimate child status that Suwu had. It would definitely lead to a disastrous war that would affect the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Gu Duxing's big western sky, Dong Wushang's extreme heaven, Ao Xian's green firmament sky, Xie Danxiong's ink cloud sky, Chu Yang's heavenly armament pavilion's demon emperor sky, and Mo Tianji's heavenly secrets intelligence department, which was spread throughout the entire imperial court, as well as GMO, Luo Kadi and Rui Budong's teams. Tan Tan's forces would collectively go on a rampage. All the movements of these forces would directly trigger a catastrophe in the Heaven Imperial Court, without the need for the heavenly demons to invade. The original forces in the Heaven Imperial Court might even be wiped out. Of course, the Heavenly Calamity Army would also be destroyed. In the end, only the heavenly demons would benefit. The most fundamental meaning behind Xie Danxiong's actions today was that he represented the standpoint of all his brothers. No one can slander my big brother in front of me. If you dare, then bring it on. You will have to pay the price. This was the common intention of all his brothers. No one was an exception. No matter how strong the elven race was, once they were faced with these forces that were enough to shake the entire Heaven Imperial Court, they would probably only end up disintegrating overnight. Other than that, there was no other possibility. At this moment, the archer god had already chased after them. He was like a meteor in the sky. Xie Danxiong stared coldly at the archer god's figure that was getting closer and closer. He said indifferently, "I will leave this elf to you. If you come to an agreement, the misunderstanding will be cleared up, and everyone will be happy. If not, we will start a war, and the elven race will be wiped out." After that, he moved and retreated to one side. The demon empress sighed and said, "Xianghua, have you ever thought about the heavenly demons that are about to invade? I'm afraid such a harsh statement is inappropriate." Xie Danxiong sneered. "But have they ever thought about my big brother? How can my big brother be slandered at will? My explanation just now, and now there is a chance to clear up the misunderstanding. This is already our greatest sincerity. Is this still not enough? As for whether the elven race can understand and grasp it, it depends on the elven race's fate. What does it have to do with me?" The demon empress and East sovereign sighed at the same time. Xie Danxiong's words were really overbearing. In the end, the elven race was only the target of deceit. They were also the victims. The conflict between the two sides was caused by this, but it was not to the extent of wiping out the elven race. However, Xie Danxiong's standpoint was like this. It was also in accordance with the laws of Heaven Imperial Court. The bigger the fist, the bigger the reason. No matter what reason you used to slander our big brother, the fact is that you slandered our big brother. If you didn't grasp the opportunity to clear up the misunderstanding between the two sides, then you deserve to die. What does it have to do with others? Since the conversation had already reached this point, there was nothing more to say. Everything had reached the extreme. There was no more room for negotiation. The two of them did not doubt that if the elven race dared to say something like, "Chu Yang is the illegitimate son of the East Sovereign and the Demon Empress," then Xie Danxiong would immediately return to Ink Cloud Sky. Then the entire Ink Cloud Sky would be mobilized. Even if they had to fight to the last soldier, they would not let the elven race go. And as long as Xie Danxiong was the first to move, Dong Wushang, Ao Xian, Gu Duxing, Mo Tianji and the others would definitely not sit back and watch. They would also move. With these forces together, even if the elven race was strong, they would still be destroyed. Chu Yang's reputation could be used as a joke between the brothers. Even if it was a little too much, it was just for fun between the brothers. However, as long as outsiders spoke carelessly, they would not rest until they were dead. Even if Chu Yang himself did not mind, and did not intend to do so, it would be useless. The brothers would automatically do it. This point the East Sovereign and the Demon Empress realized at the same time. But it was also because they realized it that the two of them were even more troubled. When the rumors started to spread, why didn't the two of them immediately take action to clarify the rumors? Why did they have to fight without any explanation, causing the situation to go out of control and evolve into such a bad situation today? The wings of Chu Yang's tribulation were already growing. With the combined strength of tribulation now, it was enough to do things that even the East Sovereign and the Demon Empress could not do. This was strength. This was the hard truth. No one could deny it. But the elven race was so stubborn. They would not easily change their minds and original intentions. When these two equally stubborn forces collided, the result would be the elven race being destroyed and tribulation suffering heavy losses. The arrow god gradually approached and stared at Xue Leihan. Of course, he did not know that this Xue Leihan in front of him was not the East Sovereign just now. "East Sovereign, what do you mean by this?" The arrow god looked serious. Xue Leihan frowned and said softly, "I have already said what I can say. This is not something that I can explain clearly by myself. You need to judge everything yourself." The arrow god stared fixedly at Xue Leihan. He wanted to say something but stopped. He actually fell silent. Xue Leihan's words seemed weak, but it was also the sharpest counterattack. "If I say that I didn't do it, would you believe me? If I say that I did it, would you believe me?" How can you believe me? How can you not believe me? These were all unsolvable problems. At this moment someone suddenly exclaimed, What is this? His voice was filled with disbelief. The person who spoke was also an expert at the peak of the saint level. His purpose for coming this time was very simple. It was just to watch this battle of the century. However, after the battle ended, he inadvertently looked down and immediately discovered an extremely strange phenomenon. For a time, even with the mental fortitude of an expert at his level, he could not help but cry out involuntarily. Everyone involuntarily looked towards the direction of the voice. Just now, the short sword that Xie Danqiong shot out, and the arrow god's arrow collided midway. Both sides had condensed all of their cultivation. At the moment when the two sides came into contact, the resulting violent explosion and impact actually lifted up the dense forest that was no less than a few thousand feet in radius. It flew up into the air. The area of the forest that was lifted up this time was unprecedented. The Southern Sky Forest was the most famous forest in the imperial court. The vegetation here was already densely distributed to a considerable extent. The roots of the trees and grass intertwined with each other, almost covering the entire ground. Such a dense forest was lifted up in one go, and the ground underneath was completely lifted up as well. This was originally a miracle that was almost impossible to happen. However, this person's eyes were sharp. He accidentally discovered that under the ground that was lifted up 1,000 feet, a large area of buildings was revealed. There were even traces of people. Seeing this scene, that person finally could not help but exclaim, The arrow god and Donghuang's abnormal battle actually created an underground world? What kind of concept was this? Everyone followed his gaze and looked down. But at this moment, the plants that were flying in the sky finally came to an end and fell back down again. The demon empress frowned. With a thought she flew out. Suddenly Lu Yinshui waved her sleeves. The piece of land with the abandoned vegetation that was about to fall from the sky was lifted up by her sleeves. It flew to an unknown place. Chapter 26:18. The saint was about to vomit blood. Today, he had suffered too much of a loss. With every cheer that came from behind him, the anger in the sage's heart grew even greater. He had originally planned to watch the show with Xue Leihan, but in the end, he had to go on stage himself. And he had to kill his own people. He had to kill them. The 10,000 saints' true spirits here were all carefully cultivated by him. Seeing that the day of harvest was about to come, he was forced to personally destroy this base. Thinking of this, the saint's heart was bleeding. But just like what Dong Huang had said, everyone knew that the Mountain River Sword was the greatest nemesis of the 10,000 saints' true spirits. Other than this, there was really no other way to completely destroy the 10,000 saints' true spirits, especially not to let them transfer cultivation to their master. Because of this, the saint had no choice but to take action. He had no choice but to take action. Under everyone's gaze, the Mountain River Sword suddenly shook violently. An array of sword aura shot out like a dragon. He roared, 10,000 saints' true spirits, give me your lives. As this sword was shot out, waves of blood instantly surged below. Another round of deafening cheers came from above. Xue Leihan's voice rang out. Your Majesty's cultivation is too high, as expected of the number one person in the heavenly court. Too powerful. As expected of the saint. Everyone echoed. Xie Danqiong took advantage of the chaos and roared. Dozens with one sword. Hundreds with 10 swords. Come on, saint. After 300 to 500 swords, all the true spirits here will perish. Everyone shouted together. Come on, your majesty. After 300 to 500 swords, all the true spirits here will perish. Victory. Victory. Invincible. Your majesty is invincible. Too awesome. 10,000 saints true spirits. Last demon clown, Mountain River Sword moves, all true spirits perish. The battle below. It continued. The saint's eyes were red as he slaughtered. The crowd above was still cheering. Everyone above was happy from the bottom of their hearts. The 10,000 saints true spirits base was finally destroyed. However, the saint below felt his heart bleed every time he killed someone. What the fuck is going on? The 10,000 saints true spirits that I've painstakingly cultivated for so many years have yet to be put to use. How could I have killed them all by myself? Countless painstaking efforts all for naught? However, he couldn't say anything. He didn't dare to say anything. Moreover, he had to pretend to be righteous. In this world, was there anything more tragic than this? Shuelehan, Demon Empress, I am absolutely irreconcilable with you. The sage roared madly in his heart. It's so satisfying. It's so satisfying. Shuelehan sighed from the bottom of his heart. I also think it's too satisfying. The Demon Empress smiled until her eyebrows curved. The most refreshing and comfortable thing in my life is none other than this moment today. Ha 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 ha. The two of them laughed together. The two of them did not try to hide their voices at all. It seemed that he had deliberately spread the news to His Majesty the Sage's ears. The Sage was so angry that he almost had a cerebral hemorrhage on the spot. A strong impulse to immediately rush out and kill Dong Huang, and the Demon Empress was stirred up, and it was hard to suppress. But now there were so many people watching over here. No matter how powerful he was, he definitely couldn't kill so many people. Moreover, there were super experts like Dong Huang, Demon Empress and Arrow God here. If he acted rashly, he would most likely be the one who died. Moreover, once his identity was exposed, he would really be a rat on the street. From the revered His Majesty the Sage Monarch, to becoming the Thousand Saints' true demon, that was the enemy of the world. Then everything would be over. He could only continue to kill. Falling into such a vile situation, even the shrewd His Majesty, the Saint Monarch, nearly vomited blood and died. Below, there were already corpses everywhere, and there was no sign of life. Finally, the three experts guarding this place rushed out. However, the moment the three of them rushed out, they didn't look for His Majesty the Sage to fight. Instead, they turned into three different directions and escaped. But Shuelehan, Demon Empress and Arrow God were guarding here, and they had long been on guard against anyone escaping. How could they let them escape successfully? There was a tremor in the air, and an arrow flashed. A person was already on fire, and even the last bit of his soul was blown into smithereens. This is the soul-chasing arrow. Arrow God was a little tired. Its power is great, but it is also extremely vicious. Once this arrow is shot, it will instantly destroy the divine sense and soul of the archer. I have never been willing to use it lightly, and I haven't used it even once in these millions of years. But today, facing the Thousand Saints' true spirit, I don't have such scruples. With the soul destroyed, I believe that even the Thousand Saints' true spirit can't do anything. As he spoke, Dong Huang and Demon Empress had already separated to block the other two and attacked with all their might. The other two were like birds that were startled by the twang of a bow, barely holding on. In just a moment, they were already killed by the other two, and their souls were also destroyed. The screams below were still continuous, rising and falling one after another. Demon Empress kept waving her hands, sweeping away the dust and smoke, so that it didn't obstruct everyone's vision at all. Everything that happened below was seen by everyone. Everyone cheer for His Majesty the Saint. Xia Dan Xiong let out a long sigh, and said with extreme schadenfreude, I can't watch it anymore, it's too cruel. He added in his heart, Saint Monarch is too pitiful. But I feel so good watching it. Even the arrow wounds on my body don't hurt anymore. No one knew this Jade Flower Emperor, and someone immediately retorted, this is the Thousand Saints' true spirit, the most evil existence in this world. What's there to not watch? Every one of them should be chopped into meat paste. Don't abuse your compassion. His Majesty the Saint Monarch's way of doing things is the right way. His Majesty the Saint Monarch, you can do it. Xia Dan Xiong nodded repeatedly, and his attitude was sincere. My knowledge is shallow, and I am a good person. You are right. Your Majesty the Saint Monarch, you can do it. Destroy the Thousand Saints' true spirit, and don't let the person behind the scenes get any benefits. The person next to him nodded and said, that's right. Everything here depends on Your Majesty the Saint Monarch. Your Majesty has worked hard. Demon Empress Dong Huang laughed heartily upon hearing this. It's about time, let's go down too. Xia Dan Xiong swallowed a heavy pill, and instantly felt his body recover a lot. Xie Danxiong had deliberately created the situation in the previous battle. He had limited the distance between the two of them to a very subtle distance. And everything had turned out as Xie Danxiong had expected. Both of them had suffered heavy injuries. However, only their bodies had suffered injuries. Their vitality and spirit had suffered limited damage. So they hadn't injured their foundations. Xie Danxiong's injuries had healed by 30% after he had taken a heavy pill. He hadn't fully recovered, but he had regained considerable fighting strength. The elf archer god naturally did not have a healing elixir like the heavy pill. But how could the elf race lack elixirs? In fact, in the fierce battle just now, he was able to shoot an ultimate move like the soul-chasing arrow, to kill an expert at the peak level, which was already evident. It's time? Go down. Shui Leihan and the Demon Empress looked at him in surprise. When? Why do we have to go down? Wouldn't it be more satisfying to watch him kill his own people here? The archer god was instantly stunned. Kill his own people? What did this mean? If this was a reprimand, it would be a huge reprimand. The saint put in a lot of effort to kill the 10,000 saints' true spirits here. And you still say this behind his back. Isn't this too sneaky? If I'm not wrong, there should be one of his doppelgangers below, Xie Danxiong said lightly. Moreover, there are countless heavenly treasures and resources here. These things should be divided among everyone. Ha! At this moment, Shui Leihan, the Demon Empress, and the archer god looked at Xie Danxiong with a strange expression. You mean to take advantage of the situation? The archer god really did not understand. What was this young man thinking? Did he have any integrity? Others were killing until blood flowed like rivers. But he was spouting nonsense. In fact, he wanted to take advantage of others. Of course, he did not recognize that this guy in front of him was Dong Huang, who was fighting with him just now. Xie Danxiong had already recovered the aura of the Ink Cloud Heavenly Emperor. That was a unique aura that could be distinguished at a glance. Just like how the elf archer god knew Dong Huang very well, but did not recognize Shui Leihan. It was the same now. He was already very familiar with Xie Danxiong, but did not recognize the Jade Flower Emperor of the Ink Cloud Heavenly Emperor at all. What are you talking about? How can you spout nonsense like this? How can this be taking advantage of the situation? Xie Danxiong said seriously. This is obviously enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. Not letting the saint take the limelight, cleaning up the dregs and returning a clean space to the imperial court. The archer god was completely speechless. So words could be said like this? At this moment, the archer god had a feeling of reverence for this unknown guy in front of him. This kind of feeling was not felt even by the saint Dong Huang and the demon empress. Indeed, when a person was shameless, he was invincible in the world. There was no limit to shamelessness, no limit, no bottom line. After we go down, you guys are in charge of blocking the saint. You must hold him back for a while I focus on searching for the treasures, Xie Danxiong said. The Demon Empress had always been grateful that Xie Danxiong replaced Shui Leihan in this battle, so she agreed almost without hesitation. The archer god was a little stunned. What was the identity of this shameless fellow? He could actually talk to the Demon Empress and Dong Huang like this? And why did these words sound so harsh? The saint of the Fling clan had just exterminated countless 10,000 saints' true spirits here. Even if the saint did not care about the spoils of war here, shouldn't you at least ask for his opinion first? Why did you go up directly, and even work with the Demon Empress to guard against the saint? This was too unreasonable, right? May I ask who you are? What is your name? The archer god asked cautiously. This is the new Heavenly Emperor of the Ink Cloud Heavenly Emperor. Her Majesty the Jade Flower Emperor. Dong Huang Shui Leihan smiled and introduced. The archer god was in a mess when he heard this information. This wretched and shameless guy was actually a heavenly emperor. Chapter 26:19. The newly ascended heavenly emperor of Moyan Sky, Jade Flower Heavenly Emperor, was actually such a shameless and wretched person who took advantage of others. It was truly a pity for such a good body, such a graceful demeanor. Sigh. No one was perfect. Brother god of archery, shall we go together? Shui Leihan looked at the god of archery and asked with concern. Are your injuries serious? How could the god of archery show weakness in front of the opponent just now? Especially now that Xue Leihan was so calm and full of energy. He subconsciously replied, "I'm fine. I'm very good." After the battle just now, Xue Leihan actually seemed to have fully recovered, but he himself was still quite a distance away from full recovery. This was probably the difference in strength. Although the god of archery really did not want to admit defeat, he had to admit that Xue Leihan was indeed stronger than him. Just like that, the four of them went down together. Soon after, a few more people from the dark shadow followed. One of them, a white robe fluttering in the wind, was none other than Zi Xieching. The moment she jumped down, Xue Leihan and the demon empress noticed her. At this moment, the eyes of the two kings were filled with warmth. This was the daughter of my brother, the only bloodline. This was the daughter of my sister, the only descendant. The lord was on a killing spree below, but he still maintained his elegant demeanor. Waves of blood rolled under his sword, and as far as the eye could see, this place had become a slaughterhouse. Listening to the almost continuous praises above, the lord's face became more and more gloomy. The murderous intent also became more and more intense. The chilling intent almost covered the whole small world. This time, it was really a case of going for wool and coming home shorn. However, who would have thought that Zi Xieching actually burned the land within a radius of 3,000 miles of Luohua City to the ground? Who would have thought that there was no more forest there? Instead, it prompted the god of archery to choose the southern forest as the venue for the battle? What was even more unexpected was that the battle between the two of them, an expected peak collision, did not hurt them at all. Instead, it brought disaster to the entire southern forest. This was definitely an unimaginable thing, but it happened right before their eyes. It exposed the biggest secret that they had painstakingly hidden. There were a total of 3 such bases, and one of them had already been destroyed. But no matter what, that was destroyed in the hands of the enemy. Now, the one here was destroyed by his own hands. How much effort did this take? Only then would he be able to establish one? It was ruined just like that. Not to mention, some people would be gone forever. Where could he find such a suitable person? The sage waved his sword again, and the hundreds of people in front of him screamed and fell to the ground at the same time. Their souls were extinguished, and their hearts were filled with rage. Xue Leihan had already gone to the extreme. Yao Exiner, I will never forgive the two of you. You actually forced me to such a state. If he didn't take revenge for this, he wouldn't. I swear I'm not a human. If I let you die so easily, I would be letting you down. One day, I will definitely let you all taste the taste of becoming a myriad saint's true spirit. You will beg for death, but you won't be able to die. Just you wait. This one-sided slaughter had come to an end. When he leapt down, the sage had already notified his doppelganger at the first moment, allowing him to simultaneously start a massacre from the inside. But when he rushed down, he would immediately disappear. He couldn't appear again, and he couldn't leave behind any traces. In this way, other than protecting his doppelganger, he could more or less absorb some of the power of the myriad saint's true spirit and recoup some of his losses. But the key problem that had yet to be solved was, there were peak-level experts everywhere. How was the doppelganger going to escape in the end? The only feasible way was to sacrifice the 3 great demon commanders to attract everyone's attention, and then let the doppelganger escape by digging a hole underground. Right now, the doppelganger was probably thousands of miles away. The sage was finally completely relieved, and he continued his massacre with a cold face. As long as the doppelganger was fine, it was considered cheap. If the doppelganger was exposed, that would be the most terrible thing. The sage could still afford to lose the myriad saint's true spirit here. As long as he recovered the resources and treasures here, and spent some effort, he could still rebuild it with some time. But at this moment, protecting himself was still the most important thing. As for these people, if they died, then so be it. The sage could only comfort himself like this. If he wanted to rebuild a true spirit base of such a scale, even if he had countless resources, without hundreds of thousands of years of time and effort, it would be impossible. Your Majesty is indeed invincible and peerless. Xue Leihan's smiling voice came from afar. Such a huge base of myriad saints' true spirit was actually completely destroyed by your majesty's sword, not leaving a single bit behind. The sage's face was livid. He said coldly, Xue Leihan, why aren't you coming up to help? What are you saying? If a few of them escape, that would be a huge problem. Xue Leihan laughed. How could I not know the stakes? I also want to help, but I don't have a divine weapon like the mountain and river sword. How about this? Lend me the mountain and river sword, and you go to one side to rest for a while. Leave the rest to me, let me do my best. How about it? When everything is done, I will return the mountain and river sword immediately, without any delay. The demon empress smiled sweetly. That's right, I can testify to this. If Xue Leihan dares to swallow your mountain and river sword, I will be the first to not let him off. I will definitely get it back for you. The sage rolled his eyes fiercely and snorted coldly. An impulse to swallow Xue Leihan, and the demon empress alive rose in his heart. He didn't want to speak anymore. These two bastards sure know how to talk. Give you the mountain and river sword? If I believe your nonsense, and really give you the mountain and river sword, it would be strange if I can still get it back. Such a naive and childish trick of trying to gain something without risking anything. And you actually want to use it on me. This is simply the biggest joke in the world. As for the demon empress, she is even more shameless. You actually testify? Who doesn't know that the two of you are in the same boat now? To think you can say such words to testify. If this sword fell into Xue Leihan's hands, perhaps Xue Leihan would feel embarrassed. It might really be returned, but with you Yao Exiner as a witness, it would be a complete waste. It would definitely be a one-way trip. Unreasonable. This was a woman's privilege. Hurry up and do it. Is there any meaning in saying such things? The sage said extremely gloomily. Looks like your majesty still can't bear to part with the mountain and river sword. Xue Leihan shook his head and sighed. Isn't it just a sword? The demon empress said disdainfully. Do you have to treat it like a treasure? You don't even trust the two of us, humph. Too stingy. We only brought it up because we sympathize with him, and want him to rest. That's right. If he doesn't want to give it up, I don't want to take it either. My good intentions are treated as ill intent. How can there be such an ungrateful person in this world? And this person is the sage. The demon empress complaints kept coming. The sage was already so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Even the archer god at the side was stunned. He was also dumbfounded. The two of you are speaking too lightly. That's the mountain river sword, the #1 divine weapon in the heavenly imperial court. If it were me, I wouldn't hand it over either. This has nothing to do with being ungrateful, right? Of course this was just this. Xue Leihan and the demon empress didn't stay idle. Especially the surviving 10,000 saints' true spirits who were escaping in all directions. Their paths of escape were completely blocked by the two of them. Boundless energy surrounded all of them in a large circle, allowing the saint monarchs to slaughter them. At this moment the two of them were like herding sheep with a whip. They were doing it happily, while the sage was killing until blood flowed like a river. But he was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. And in this gap, Xie Danxiong had already sneaked into the building complex like a wisp of smoke. Who is that? Why is he entering and leaving this place so rashly? The sage frowned and asked. It's His Majesty, the Jade Flower Emperor. He went in to search for the remaining survivors. What if there are fish that escaped the net? Xue Leihan smiled and replied. Nonsense. Simply ridiculous. Under such a large-scale extermination, who would dare to hide in the building, waiting to be caught like a turtle in a jar? Fish that escaped the net. Ridiculous. The sage roared. Xie Danxiong is obviously going to take advantage of them. After saying that, he suddenly remembered. Why would the Jade Flower Emperor suddenly come here? I clearly saw him in the big Western Paradise. Xue Leihan frowned. Oh, Your Majesty, have you seen the Jade Flower Emperor in the big Western Paradise before? May I know why the two celestial emperors have gathered? The sage knew that his mind was in a mess today, and he accidentally let his mouth slip. He said angrily, You, the East Sovereign, are not qualified to meddle in my affairs. Xue Leihan laughed. But you, the sage, are also not qualified to give me orders. If you don't want to say, then don't. Anyway, the Jade Flower Emperor is right in front of us. I'll just ask him himself later. Xie, come out. The sage roared as he killed his own people. He won't come out for the time being. Since this is the base of the 10,000 saints' true spirit, there must be some resources there. His Majesty, the Jade Flower Emperor, said that he wanted to take some from there. Shuelehan laughed. The great heavenly demon war is imminent. Mo Yuntian has experienced the invasion of the demons, and his foundation has been damaged greatly. The Jade Flower Emperor's foundation is even weaker. It's reasonable to let him strengthen his strength for the future. I believe you won't mind, and will definitely be happy to see this happen. The sage said angrily, Nonsense. What do you mean by happy to see this happen? Those things are mine. He jumped up and was about to rush in to stop Xie. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The demon empress rolled up the remaining tens of millions of holy true spirits and sent them to the Saint Monarch one by one. She said lightly, Your Majesty Saint Monarch, even if you are worried about the treasures inside, you still have to kill all these holy true spirits first. There are priorities in this matter. How can you ruin the big picture just because of a small profit? Your Majesty Saint Monarch has always put others before yourself, public interest before private interest. I believe this is no exception, right? Besides, with your status, why would you care about those small treasures inside? Chapter 2620. The saint almost vomited blood. The treasures inside. And some. What a bunch of bastards. Every base here had countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures collected over millions of years. There were also all kinds of strange metals. And there was even a star core. How could these be treasures in the ordinary sense? To think that you said it so lightly. So the loss isn't yours, but it's mine. If you really care about the things inside, then give me the mountain and river sword. I'll kill people for you, and you go in to collect the treasures. Shuelehan smiled. The 10,000 saints' sacred spirit cannot be let go. This concerns the world, Shuelehan said earnestly. The saint snorted coldly, but the demon empress and East sovereign's words were righteous. Yes, no matter what happened now, no matter what important things were inside, it was not as important as eliminating the 10,000 saints' sacred spirit. There were so many people here watching, and in this world, it seemed that only his mountain and river sword could effectively eliminate the 10,000 saints' sacred spirit. He could not abandon the matter here, and quietly keep the most important thing. And the mountain and river sword could not fall into the hands of the demon empress and East sovereign. Then if he did not kill, who would? His only hope was that Xie Danxiong did not know what was good for him, and went to take the ordinary things first. But how could a heavenly emperor not know what was good for him? He had to kill quickly and stop him. When the holy sage thought of this, he suddenly let out a roar, and completely displayed his strongest combat strength. A magnificent sword light suddenly exploded. Boom! Even many of the surrounding buildings were smashed into smithereens. The 10,000 saints' sacred spirit, that had been slaughtered to less than 5,000, were killed by the power of one sword. They were all killed. Not a single person survived. Many of them had an intense look of confusion on their faces. Confusion, anger, fear. These people were really not the 10,000 saints' sacred spirit, but the coaches of the 10,000 saints' sacred spirit. These people had all seen the saint's clone before, and naturally recognized that this crazy executioner looked exactly the same as the saint's clone. Even the aura was the same. This was obviously their master, the true home of the 10,000 saints' sacred spirit. But why would he suddenly want to kill them? Why? There was no reason for this. Perhaps even in death, they would not understand why they had died. We have sacrificed everything for you in this dark and sunless place. It will help you cultivate the power to conquer the world, to provide you with an endless supply of power. But today, you are actually so crazy, sparing no effort to kill us? Furthermore, in an instant, all of them were controlled. No one was able to speak or ask any questions. It was like a group of mutes facing a bloody executioner, who was like the god of death. Such a feeling. Let them truly die with grievances. It's fine if you don't give us a reason, but why don't we even have the chance to ask questions? Everyone looked around, and as far as their eyes could see, There really wasn't a single living person left in this myriad saint's real spirit base. The saint's figure flashed, and he was about to rush into the building complex to stop Xie Danxiong from collecting his spoils of war. Shui Leihan coughed and said, "Your Majesty, you seem to have forgotten something extremely important." The sage asked, "En? What extremely important matter?" Shui Leihan laughed and said, "Can't you see for yourself?" The saint looked around, but did not discover anything. He said impatiently, "What exactly is it?" Shui Leihan sighed. "You didn't see such an obvious thing? You're not pretending, are you?" The saint became even more impatient. "Why would I pretend? What are you trying to do? Just say it." Shui Leihan said in surprise, "Your Majesty, the one and only saint in the world, you killed the enemies down there and showed off your power. So many of us cheered for you in unison. Now that you have obtained such a glorious victory with the power of the mountain and river sword, it is enough to be recorded in the annals of history. Shouldn't you say something to us?" Everyone was quite tired just now. The saint was really angry when he heard this. Immediately, he understood that Shui Leihan's nonsensical words were simply to buy more time for Xie Danxiong, to delay his footsteps. He decided not to talk anymore. With a move, he was about to rush into the building complex. But a white figure flashed in front of him, and the demon empress was already in front of him. She said indifferently, "Master Yin, answer a question of mine." The saint was so anxious that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. What question? The saint had to ask this question. The demon empress was even more resolute than the Donghuang. If he barged in, it was very likely that she would immediately start a war with him. This was not a good time to fight with her. The demon empress' face was cold. She questioned loudly, "When I was rushing back to the demon emperor's heaven from the extreme heaven, was it you who set up that ambush? Were you the one who did it?" The saint was stunned. He said angrily, "Nonsense. Demon Exine, are you crazy?" The demon empress asked relentlessly, "Answer me directly. I'm only asking you, is it you?" "It can't be me." The holy sage was furious. "Yao Exiner, are you trying to forcefully frame me under the bright light of the universe?" The demon empress said indifferently, "What you said doesn't count. Whether it was you or not, I will find out sooner or later. However, I have to say something first. If I have evidence and prove that it was you who did it, I will definitely kill you." The saint was so anxious that he was in no mood to argue with the demon empress. Seeing that the demon empress had stopped talking, he was about to rush in, but he heard the demon empress say, "No matter how secretive you are, you can't hide it from the world. The heavens had eyes, and they would not let a matter sink into the sea forever. Whatever you do, the heavens are watching. Sage, you should be prepared." The sage didn't pay any attention to him, and continued to rush forward. But another figure flashed. The Jade Flower Emperor, dressed in white, had already walked out of the ruins of the building complex. She walked over as if she was taking a stroll. The saint was stunned and stopped in his tracks. Since Xie Danxiong had come out, he must have looted all the resources. At least, those important things must have been taken away by him. There was no use in going in now. Xie Danxiong made a very free and easy expression when he saw that everyone was looking at him. He spread out his hands, and said with a wry smile on his face, "What's really surprising is that the base of the all-holy real spirit is so big. But it's empty inside. There's nothing inside. This is really surprising." Shui Leihan asked in surprise, "Nothing at all? Your Majesty, Jade Flower Emperor, did you see wrongly or found the wrong place? How can there be no resources at all in the 10,000 Saints' true spirit base?" This question also answered the question that everyone present was wondering about. Xie Danxiong said with a bitter smile, "There's really nothing. How could I find the wrong place? I've searched every room and every secret underground warehouse. Indeed, other than some food, there's nothing at all. This is really strange." The demon empress frowned. Could it be that the 10,000 Saints' true spirit ate, drank, used up all of it? This seems to be the most reasonable and probable explanation. Xie Danxiong frowned seriously and nodded. "I heard that the 10,000 Saints' true spirit eats everything. Not to mention heavenly treasures and strange metals, they even eat feces. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so notorious." That makes sense. The Jade Flower Emperor is so knowledgeable. Today we've opened our ears again. The East Sovereign and the Demon Empress nodded in agreement. The others were flabbergasted, and dumbstruck. What kind of words were these? What the hell was this? The 10,000 Saints' true spirit even eats feces? Furthermore, these words came from the mouth of the Supreme Celestial Emperor of a generation. Furthermore, such ridiculous words actually had the East Sovereign and the Demon Empress standing by the side with a serious expression on their faces. Everyone was a little dizzy. Was this real or fake? Could it really be real? Otherwise, the three great kings wouldn't make such a joke, right? It should be more or less like that, right? There were already some busybodies who flew in to take a look. When they came out, they shook their heads. It's really empty. There's only some food left. There's nothing else. This 10,000 Saints' true spirit base is really too poor. The Saint Monarch's blood rushed to his head, and his face turned red. He almost spat out blood. Which one of them wasn't a smart person? Everyone knew that the Jade Flower Emperor must have taken it away. But it was obvious that the East Sovereign and the Demon Empress were supporting it. Who would have the guts to offend the three sovereigns? Wouldn't that be tired of living? Thus everyone agreed. Yes, this 10,000 Saints' true spirit base is too poor. I really didn't expect the 10,000 Saints' true spirit to be such a bunch of poor bastards. Nonsense. How can they be 10,000 Saints' true spirit if they're not poor? That makes sense. Everyone. Today's matter has proven that the 10,000 Saints' true spirit is truly a strange existence. They don't have their own souls and thoughts. Xia Danxiong looked at everyone and solemnly said, especially the master of the All Saints' true spirit. He's a typical bastard without parents. He's a heartless bastard. Everyone, you must be careful in the future. Don't let such a bastard take advantage of you. Be careful. Once you're controlled and become a 10,000 Saints' true spirit, it's like being controlled to kill the person you love the most. Even though you know it's painful, you still can't help but do it. That's the most tragic and cruel thing in the world. Xie Danxiong said earnestly. Shui Leihan nodded and reminded. Yes, everyone. According to what I know, there's definitely more than one base of the 10,000 Saints' true spirit. Since there's one here, and on such a large scale, there must be others. Back then, when we exterminated the 10,000 Saints' true devil, we destroyed a lot of bases like this before we could confirm that it was completely wiped out. Chapter 26-21. Everyone, you must be more careful when you travel the world in the future. Pay attention to the movements in this area. This is an important matter that concerns the future of the imperial court. You must not let your guard down. Shui Leihan said seriously. Yes, I've heard of this before too. A guy at the side pretended to be knowledgeable and said, the two celestial emperors, His Majesty East Sovereign and Her Majesty Chonghua, are right. I've heard of it too. Although the owner of the 10,000 Saints' celestial spirit is evil, there's another secret that no one knows. Evil people will be dealt with by evil people. Everyone asked in unison. What secret? How is it that evil people will be dealt with by evil people? This person shook his head proudly. It's said that there's a prerequisite for using the 10,000 Saints' celestial spirit. After finding the 10,000 Saints' celestial spirit, the wife of the person behind the scenes has to sleep with him for a night. Only then can the process of activating the 10,000 Saints' celestial spirit be activated. After so many years, just the height of the cuckoldry. To say that it can hold up the sky is an understatement. It's really impressive. Ha 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 ha. As soon as this sentence came out, Cloudmaster's face changed color instantly. He stared at this guy who was spouting nonsense. In his heart, he had already sentenced this guy to death. No, he must make him beg for death and suffer in agony forever. Shui Leihan was also displeased. Damn it, although you don't know, Cloudmaster's wife is my biological sister. Although I've long refused to admit that I have such a sister, I can't let you humiliate her like this. This way of saying it is too perverted. How can you be a bitch? You've gone too far. The owner of the 10,000 Saints' celestial spirit certainly deserves to die. But what does it have to do with his wife? Shui Leihan said with a dark face. Such groundless accusations. and even tarnishing the reputation of an unrelated person is a great sin. That person's face instantly turned pale. He bowed repeatedly. Yes, yes, Your Majesty's sovereign is right. I was too quick with my words. Mine is not, mine is not. The saint looked at him again and forced a smile. What's your name? That person's face turned pale. He replied with a trembling voice. I'm called Fatty Nyo. Big Fatty Nyo. Not bad. He's at the peak of the diviner realm. He was only one step away from the sage realm. Your future is promising, the sage said indifferently. Do you want to work in the Holy Emperor Palace? That person would never have thought that he had casually created such a rumor, and had actually obtained the recognition and favor of the sage? Perhaps it was because of his undisguised hatred for evil? Immediately he was overjoyed. Many thanks for Your Majesty's support. This subordinate will definitely be at your beck and call. I will do my best and be loyal to you until my death. The sage nodded. And it's rare for you to have such intentions. Then you should report to the Holy Emperor Palace when you go out later. The Holy Emperor Palace is short of manpower right now. Let's go there. That person was overjoyed and said, Yes, yes. Thank you, Sir Sage, for your guidance. This lowly one will rush there immediately, and will not dare to delay for even a moment. Many people around him looked at him enviously. This guy is really lucky. Just because of a slip of the tongue, he actually entered the headquarters of Holy Emperor Palace. It seems that I will have to curry favor with him in the future. After tearing it down, there was an endless stream of congratulations. This big fatty Nyo's face lit up with joy, and he returned the greeting repeatedly. In his expression, he could not help but have a kind of superior air. Xie Danxiong, Demon Empress Xue Leihan, and the others looked at this big fatty Nyo speechless. Others might not know, but how could they not know? Since this big fatty Nyo said that he was a cuckold, he was destined to have a difficult ending. With the power of the sage, even if the Eastern Emperor wanted to protect him, it was already destined to be impossible to deal with such a person. The reason why he let him enter the headquarters of Holy Emperor Palace was only to make it more convenient to deal with him. Now they could already foresee this guy's miserable ending. To think that he was still complacent here. He really didn't know death. But the three of them did not say anything. Such a person who had a slip of the tongue and casually slandered the reputation of others. His death was really not to be regretted. No matter who he slandered, even if it was an enemy or an evil person, this person's character was not to be complimented. Such a person would be useless to the world if he died early, and was reincarnated early. Your Majesty Eastern Emperor, I rushed in on impulse just now, thinking of making a small fortune or something. But there was nothing. I was really disappointed. Before I went in, I even took 2 space rings from you, thinking that this place was so big that 2 space rings could be filled no matter what. In the end, I still came back empty-handed. Now it seems that I was really too greedy. Here, I'll return the rings to you. Xie Danxiong took out 2 space rings and handed them over. Seeing this, the sage gritted his teeth and finally could not help but say coldly, Xie Danxiong, is there really nothing in your space rings? Not necessarily. This bastard actually dared to share the loot so brazenly in front of him. Did he think that the sage did not know that the 2 of you were in cahoots? Xie Danxiong's action undoubtedly added fuel to the fire, making the sage, who was already depressed to the point of death, even more depressed. Of course, Cloud Lord was clear about what was in his base, and how much there was. He believed that no one would be clearer than the sage about everything inside. The materials and resources inside could definitely be described as enormous. And Xie Danxiong had clearly already plundered everything inside. And now, he handed over these 2 space rings to the Eastern Emperor. It was clear that he was going to split the loot in half, so the space inside was definitely full. His hands were empty. Empty. Go and fool a child. Thinking of this, the sage's heart was bleeding again. Under his unwillingness, he finally asked the question just now. Xie Danxiong smiled and said, Your Majesty Sage, although you're the only sage and the #1 person in the heavenly court, I'm still a celestial emperor. You called my name so bluntly just now, it's a bit disrespectful. I don't want to answer this question of yours. pestering endlessly. Now Xie Danqiong had this idea, but the reason was impeccable. No matter what, I'm still the Jasper Flower Emperor of Moyenshan. Even if I haven't been in this position for long, my position has already been established. Even if you're the sage, you're not my superior. You should at least show some basic courtesy when talking to me. At the very least, you should respectfully address me as Your Majesty Jasper Flower Emperor. Right? The sage nodded slowly. Your Majesty Jasper Flower Emperor is indeed proud and unyielding, a heroic young man. Well said, well said. Xie Danqiong raised his head and laughed. Reporting to Your Majesty Sage, I borrowed these 2 space rings from the Eastern Emperor. There's nothing inside. Your Majesty Eastern Emperor and Demon Empress can testify for me. The Eastern Emperor took the space ring, glanced at it, and said, There's really nothing inside. The Demon Empress looked over and glanced at it in passing. She said, There's really nothing inside. The design of this space ring is quite unique. I like it very much. This belongs to me. Seeing how the Eastern Emperor Demon Empress spoke so confidently and seriously, everyone couldn't help but feel suspicious. Could it be that this base was indeed an empty shell? But being able to exterminate the 10,000 saints' true spirits here was already a great gain. Without more spoils of war, it would only be a little less icing on the cake. Besides, even if there was, it wouldn't be their turn. The sage's chest rose and fell violently. A mouthful of blood that he had been holding back for a long time finally surged up to his throat, but he forcefully swallowed it back. Great, acting right in front of me like this. Teasing me right in front of my face like this. You're sure that I can't flare up right in front of you? But I can't. When you Shuelehan checked it, you intentionally opened it. Other people's cultivation levels are low, and because of the angle, of course, they couldn't see what was inside. But I saw it clearly. Inside were all rare heavenly treasures and mystical minerals. I can name every single one of them. Many of them were placed here by me personally back then. The 3 of us saw with our own eyes that there were things inside. But you, Shuelehan, and the Demon Empress, actually looked at the space full of space rings and directly said that they were empty. And that Demon Empress, Shuelehan and Xie Danqiong were in cahoots to split the spoils right in front of their faces. You also went up to join in the fun and brazenly took a share, and then testified that there was really nothing inside. Can you be any more shameless? Can you be any more disgusting to me? That's all mine. Mine. Do you have any sense of shame, do you? The sage naturally kept these words in his heart, and didn't say a single word. However, he already felt that he couldn't stay here any longer. If he were to stay here any longer, he would truly be angered to the point of vomiting blood and dying today. Xie Danqiong rolled his eyes and said, Oh, Your Majesty Saint Monarch is not asking this because you want a share of the loot, right? Haha, speaking of which, your contribution today is indeed the greatest. You, who wields the mountain and river sword, are truly worthy of being called the #1 person in Heaven Imperial Court. Unlike the others who can only play on the sidelines, your great achievement of using the mountain and river sword to destroy the 10,000 saints' true spirits today will definitely be passed down through the ages, passed down through the generations, and left your name in history. He paused and said embarrassedly, You said that you spent so much effort and didn't gain anything. It's indeed not appropriate. But I really didn't gain anything. Why don't you wait for a while? When I return to Dark Cloud Sky, I'll immediately send people to collect and send a batch of heavenly treasures to His Majesty the Sage Monarch. Inside, there will definitely be the heart of the stars and various elixirs, such as the resurrection grass, he solemnly guaranteed. I'll do what I say. As a celestial emperor, I still have this bit of eloquence and this bit of credibility. You won't dislike it, right? The sage glared at Xie Danqiong fiercely and said coldly, Let's go. These things that Xie Danqiong mentioned were all top-notch heavenly treasures with names and surnames. This was equivalent to stabbing another knife into the sage's wound and sprinkling a handful of salt on it. Chapter 26-22. The sage couldn't stay here any longer. He was worried that he would collapse and explode at any moment. His body flashed as he flew up and said in the sky, Your Excellency Archer God, I have another important matter to discuss with you alone. Then the saint disappeared. The us he was talking about included the elf archer god. The archer god walked to Shui Leihan and the demon empress and said in a low voice, "Don't you have any intention of talking to me?" The demon empress said lightly, "You're not stupid. Everything depends on your judgment. Archer god, I admit that your cultivation is on par with ours. But this is not a reason for us to give you special treatment. If you want us to explain anything to you, you are not qualified to do so." The archer god couldn't help but smile bitterly. Now that things had come to this, he could vaguely feel that he had done something wrong. However, the road ahead was still unclear. He couldn't find the right direction for now. The doubts in his heart were still there. However, the hatred in his heart was strangely not as sharp as before, and there was no room for him to turn it around. In that case, take care. The archer god flew up. At this moment, he received a telepathic message from Shui Leihan. If you really want to talk to the Saint Emperor alone, it's better to call a few of your brothers as witnesses. This is good for everyone. The archer god couldn't help but pause in midair. He turned around in surprise and looked at Shui Leihan. Then, with a swoosh, he disappeared without a trace. He understood what Shui Leihan meant, but he couldn't believe it. The Saint Emperor, the #1 person in the imperial court, was actually such a person. If he was really so despicable and shameless, how could he have been the Saint Emperor for so long? Especially today, he had eliminated the biggest hidden danger in the imperial court, the 10,000 Saints' spiritual body. The Saint Emperor didn't seem like a bad person, but neither did the East Sovereign. But the Saint Emperor said that the East Sovereign was a bad person, and the East Sovereign also said that the Saint Emperor was the bad person. Then, who was the real bad person? A great traitor was loyal. Was this the kind of person they were talking about? Could it be that meeting the Saint Emperor alone this time would really be dangerous? Was this possible? Was this impossible? After the archer god left, he pondered over this question. He thought for a long time. In the end, he decided that he was not the only one who could decide the fate of the elven race. The other brothers also needed to be witnesses. He needed to make a judgment. They needed to make corresponding decisions. Therefore, he decided to bring his brothers along to meet the sage. He wanted to gather all the higher-ups of the elf race to meet with the sage. Wouldn't this be more respectful? In this world, only the 4 elven gods were known as the 4 strongest experts of the elven race. However, no one knew that the strongest expert of the elf clan was actually the elf clan. In fact, there were 5 of them. There was another god, the dark elf god. However, this god of darkness was always hidden in the dark. Therefore, those who knew of his existence also knew that there were 5 strongest powerhouses in the elf clan, and they were the 5 elven gods. As for those who didn't know, they only knew of the 4 elven gods. In fact, those who knew about the 4 elven gods were already experts who had reached a certain level in the world. You've gained quite a bit today, haven't you? Shui Leihan looked at Xie Danqiong. It's all right. Xie Danqiong smiled. When these things are handed over to Big Brother, they will naturally become more valuable. The demon empress asked curiously, Xie Danqiong, will all the things that you and your brothers have gained be handed over to Chu Yang? Have you ever thought of studying them yourself? Xie Danqiong said frankly, of course we have thought about it and studied it, but we didn't get any results. We don't seem to have the talent. Fortunately, Big Brother is also exploring. When he has formed a fixed theory or experience, he will teach it to us. Our future will definitely be separated. Big Brother also hopes that no matter where we are, no matter what skills we have, we will have the power to protect ourselves. But it's still not possible now. It's still far from the time when we can calm down and study these things without any distractions. Therefore, these directions can only be pushed back. Of course, there's another reason. If we hand these things over to boss, we can immediately use them to their fullest potential. However, if we're left to fumble about on our own, we'll have to bear too many consequences of failure. And these consequences are the destruction of these treasures. The losses outweigh the gains. Xie Danqiong said lightly, the great heavenly devil war is imminent. We can't afford to lose any more. The demon empress couldn't help but sigh enviously. Having such brothers by our side really makes one envious. Xie Danxiong smiled proudly. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a furious scolding. Xie Danxiong, you little bastard! How dare you! The three of them turned their heads and looked over, only to see Zi Xiecheng rushing over like a whirlwind with a furious face. Xie Danxiong screamed when he saw the situation. His face was full of horror, and he turned to escape. What Xie Danxiong was most afraid of now was Zi Xiecheng. There was no one else. However, just at the moment when he was about to move, both sides of his waist actually went numb at the same time, and he couldn't move at all. Xie Danxiong turned his head in disbelief, looked at Dong Huang and the demon empress beside him, and said with extreme grief and indignation, You guys, just now, it was actually Dong Huang and the demon empress who took action at the same time to restrain this heavenly emperor ink cloud. As for the purpose, it was very simple and pure. It was obviously to let him accept Zi Xiecheng's punishment. Xie Danxiong obviously didn't expect such a thing to happen even in his dreams. However, looking around the heavenly imperial court, the only person who was worthy of Dong Huang and the demon empress attacking at the same time was at most Cloud Lord. Should the Jade Flower Emperor Xie Danxiong feel very proud? Why? Xie Danxiong asked in grief and indignation. He really couldn't think of why these two people would do this. Why would they treat him like this? He had just helped Shui Leihan, and even gave each of them a space ring full of good stuff. How could they turn their backs on him? This was too unreasonable. You took my things, accepted my gift, and in the blink of an eye, sold me out. What kind of explanation was this? They were still talking happily just now, and in the blink of an eye, they turned their backs on him mercilessly. Not to mention that you are Dong Huang, who has such a high status. Even if you are the most shameless hooligan, you would also have to take a break, right? Shui Leihan put his hands behind his back and said, Xie Danxiong, don't blame us. We are helping your sister-in-law now. As your sister-in-law's brother, even if you don't thank us, you shouldn't blame us, right? Don't blame you? I still have to thank you. Xie Danxiong looked sadly at this extremely shameless Emperor Dong Huang. At this moment, he almost burst into tears. Now that you have caught me, I have to wait to be beaten up. Yet I still have to thank you? How could there be such a thing in the world? Damn you, Dong Huang, can you be any more shameless? Energy would energy. Even if you are young, you don't have to be so indignant. The demon empress smiled. I also told you clearly that no matter who little Z wants to beat up, we will catch them. Even if Dong Huang doesn't help, I will help. She can beat them up however she wants. On this point, she has no principles and no bottom line. Xie Danxiong was dumbfounded and speechless. He was dumbfounded. Why was this so? However, he didn't have more time to think. Zi Xiecheng was already in front of him in a hurry. Before he could say anything, he saw Dong Huang and the demon empress lifting Xie Danxiong up at the same time. With an infinitely benevolent smile, they said, Little Z, you just want to beat this guy up to vent your anger, right? Here, I'll catch him for you. You can beat him up however you want, in whatever way you want to vent your anger. At this moment, Zi Xiecheng was stunned. After a while, she finally smiled with a red face and bowed. Uncle Shui, demonic concubine, how are you? Good, we're good. Shui Leihan and the demon empress smiled with gratification. It seemed that no matter what they did, no matter what they paid, they were already satisfied to hear the words Uncle Shui, demonic concubine. They were even a little overwhelmed by the favor. It was just a simple greeting. Was there a need to go so far? Then I'll take this guy back. Zi Xiecheng looked at Demon Xiner and Shui Leihan with some admiration. Go, good girl. Haha, do whatever you want, it's okay. The demon empress and Dong Huang hurriedly replied at the same time. It's okay. We can break his arms or legs. As long as we don't beat him to death, we can do whatever we want. We can do it until we're happy and satisfied. It's no big deal even if we really cripple him. Xie Danxiong suddenly felt a chill in his heart. What kind of saying is this? What exactly is going on? Why can't I understand? Zi Xiecheng smiled, and then turned to give orders. Men, tie this guy up and bring him back. If he dares to do anything, break his legs. If he dares to struggle, break his arms too. Zi Xiecheng gave the order with a murderous look. Xie Danxiong closed his eyes sadly. Sister-in-law, please spare my life. Spare your head, Zi Xiecheng said angrily. I'll go back and pack up first. When Chu Yang and Mo Tianji arrive, Xie Danxiong, a good day that you'll never forget is coming. Don't worry, I'm not interested in your life. I'm only interested in beating you up. As for whether Chu Yang and Mo Tianji are interested in your body or your life, it's hard to say. Xie Danxiong looked up at the sky and sighed sorrowfully. He looked at Zi Xiecheng with pleading eyes, trying to gain the sympathy of the people in front of him. But it seemed that no one cared about him. The tribulation soul transformed into a gust of wind, and it wrapped Xie Danxiong up before it left swiftly. Zi Xiecheng bowed and bade farewell to the demon empress. Then, she jumped up and rushed back to the heavenly armament pavilion. Looking at Zi Xiecheng's departure, the demon empress heaved a sigh of relief. This child is so good. I just realized that her brows are so similar to my sister Piaping back then. It's as if they were cast from the same mold. Chapter 26-23. Shuelehan frowned and said, You're wrong. Look at this child's eyes, expression, eyebrows, and nose bridge. They're all exactly the same as Zi Hao's. Especially her temperament, they can't be any more alike. Zi Hao should be comforted to have such a daughter. Shuelehan was comforted and smiled. So you're saying this girl is just like Zi Hao? She doesn't look like Ling Piaping at all? The demon empress gaze became dangerous. Shuelehan kept his mouth shut and thought to himself, this is something that everyone can see, and you're still arguing. Besides, what's the use of arguing about this now? Justice is in people's hearts. How can you argue about right and wrong? Explain yourself. The demon empress gaze became even more dangerous. Shuelehan was helpless. She does look more like Ling Piaping. Is that enough? Sigh, so justice is not in people's hearts but strength. Look at your attitude, you're obviously unwilling. Male chauvinism. The demon empress was furious. If my daughter looks like Zi Hao, how can she get married? With your brother's looks, it's already a blessing that he can find a wife. How can my little Zi look like Zi Hao? What's with that gaze of yours? Shuelehan said helplessly. What did you say? I can accept it if you say that about me. But you can't say that about my brother. What's wrong with his looks? Zi Hao is also quite a strong and handsome man with thick eyebrows and big eyes. He can't be considered ugly. The demon empress left in a huff. Shuelehan, you're really unreasonable. Justice is in people's hearts. How can you argue about right and wrong? What kind of world is this? Why did she say my lines out loud? Emperor Donghuang stood there for a long time, and finally muttered gloomily. Who's the unreasonable one? They actually quarreled over this kind of thing. He shook his head helplessly and hurried back. Not to mention how Zi Xiecheng would punish Xie Danxiong when she returned. Let's talk about Chu Yang's side. He rushed towards the southern heaven forest like a meteor chasing the moon. Just when they were about 2,000 miles away from their destination, they heard an explosion without warning. They could only see a mushroom cloud of smoke rising in the distance. It was a ghastly sight. Everyone sighed helplessly when they saw it. This should be the final strike. Is it too late? Jimo's eyes were deep and filled with nervousness and apprehension. The battle is definitely over. I just don't know how it ended. Luo Kudi also let out a long sigh. His eyes became uneasy. Everyone was worried. Was Xie Danxiong dead or alive? After this battle, was everything all right? No one could blame Xie Danxiong for not having confidence in him. After all, the elven archer's prowess was too outstanding. He had never been defeated in the past. Xie Danxiong's cultivation had advanced a lot, but everyone still didn't have much confidence in him in this battle. Only Mo Tianji was carefully listening to the movements. Chu Yang was also paying attention to the slightest change. After a while finally, both of them heaved a sigh of relief. He revealed a reassuring smile. This battle is over. Danxiong is fine. Although I don't know the final result, at the very least, there were no casualties. The elven archer and Xie Danxiong are both fine. This point can be confirmed. Chu Yang let out a long sigh of relief. Why? GMO and Luo Kudi were puzzled. Two fools. Tai Butian smiled. If something really happened to Xie Dan Xiong, Big Sister Z would have already gone crazy. How could she still hold it in? It's so quiet. Since we didn't hear Big Sister Z's crazy voice, and there weren't any subsequent outbursts of murderous aura, Xie Dan Xiong must be fine. Maybe Dan Xiong won this battle. That would be even more joyous. GMO and Luo Kudi suddenly understood. Even if we don't take sister-in-law Z into account, if something happened to Xie Dan Xiong in place of Dong Huang and the Demon Empress would have already gone crazy. Even if the Archer God died, the Archer God's elven clan would have already gone crazy. Mo Tianji looked at the two of them, as if he was looking at a fool. The situation is so calm now. How can the two of you be so scared? I really don't know what's in your heads. Tofu pudding? GMO and Luo Kudi's faces turned red. They flew into a rage out of humiliation. So what if our heads are filled with tofu pudding? So what if we're tofu pudding? Didn't you just make an extra move? Do you believe that we'll join forces to beat you up? Seeing that the two of them were really about to go crazy, Mo Tianji also shrank his neck and stopped talking. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Chu Yang, who had just heaved a sigh of relief, couldn't help but laugh when he saw this. At this moment, a figure was rapidly approaching from afar like a shooting star. Moreover, they seemed to be fleeing in a sorry state, as if they were in a panic and did not know where to go. But this person's cultivation was definitely at the peak of the heavenly imperial court. Who was this person? Chu Luo and Mo Qingwu had sharp eyes. They exclaimed at the same time. Why does it look like Cloud Master? It can't be. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were startled when they heard this. They looked over at the same time. At this moment, that figure was already less than 10,000 feet away from them. The next moment he would meet them. The person was indeed Cloud Master. But at this moment, his white robes were actually full of traces of mud. He also seemed to be a little distracted. There was a hint of anger and disappointment. Cloud Master's usual composure and elegance were nowhere to be seen. What was going on? Mo Tianji's heart skipped a beat. He immediately transmitted his voice to everyone. This person is most likely Cloud Master's clone. He must have encountered something big. At the same time, Chu Yang also said something similar. He transmitted his voice to everyone. This person is Cloud Master's clone. Although he's distracted, his strength is still intact. Everyone be careful. Mo Tianji said most likely, with a hint of uncertainty. Yet he gave a follow-up analysis. This was the quality of a think tank. Chu Yang, on the other hand, directly said with certainty, this must be Master Cloud's clone. He also analyzed Chu Yang's strength. This proved that the current Chu Yang was improving rapidly every day. At this moment, Cloud Master's clone also noticed them. An extremely fierce look flashed across his eyes. But then he wanted to turn around and leave. Obviously, he didn't want to get into a conflict with them. This was very unexpected. This was because he seemed to be the one with the upper hand in terms of strength, right? Jimo's eyes turned, and he flew forward. Hey, excuse me, brother. I'd like to ask for directions. I don't know. I don't know you. Cloud Master's clone was full of impatience. As he spoke, he turned around and was about to leave. But this guy's reaction to Jimo's words proved one thing. This guy in front of them didn't know Chu Yang and the others. If this was the Saint Lord's true form, there was no way he wouldn't know Chu Yang and the others. In other words, this was another clone with a physical body and soul. It was just that they didn't know why such a secret clone would come here like a stray dog. Luo Kadi howled and rushed forward. Little, we're asking you nicely for directions. It's fine if you don't help, but you're ignoring us? We're all people of the pugilistic world. We're one family. The pugilistic world is an umbrella that shields us from the wind and rain. It's fine if you're so unreasonable, but why are you so rude? Howl. Luo Kadi's wife, the sacrificial maiden, immediately howled. She said loudly, that's right. Little, hurry up and answer my master's question. Why are you so rude? GMO touched his chin. Didn't your elders tell you to be polite to others? If you walk the pugilistic world like this, you'll be defeated sooner or later. If your family's elders didn't tell you this famous saying, then let us brothers tell you properly today. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were instantly dumbfounded. Then they almost burst out laughing. There was really nothing that these two couldn't make a joke out of. At such a time, they could still say such unreasonable words. Even Emo Tianji was a little impressed. Do you want to die? The Saint Lord's clone glared at them with a fierce gaze. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. If you don't want to die, hurry up and get lost. The East Emperor Demon Empress, Heavenly Emperor Emo Yen, the Fairy Archer God, and the heroes from all directions were surrounding them. Just a little bit more and they would be trapped. He had just luckily escaped from a situation where he was sure to die. Furthermore, he had to dig a hole to escape. This grievance and fear almost made him explode. Now, he had finally escaped with much difficulty and retreated in one piece. His mind was still unsettled, and he was still worried that someone would chase after him, because he knew his own situation, or perhaps his cultivation was not much weaker than any of the Tian K peak stage experts. But he was definitely not their match, especially someone like the East Emperor Demon Empress, because he was just a clone in the end. Even if their strength was similar, even if their souls were strong, he would never have the foundation that they had. That kind of luck. And these things were something that a clone could never truly obtain. Therefore, he could only escape. But at this time, he met such a group of people again. At such a time, they actually asked him for directions? He was really going to faint. Was this a joke? Or were they just messing with him? Friend, you're wrong to say that. Very wrong. Chu Yang frowned and stood up. Our original intention was to ask you for directions. If you know, just say that you know. If you don't know, just say that you don't know. As for life and death, my brothers might be a little rude, but their intentions are good. Originally, I wanted to reprimand them. How can they treat strangers like this? Even if they have good intentions, they can't be like this. But friend, aren't you a little too angry? I want to argue with you about this. How can we not talk about reason when we're in the martial world? How can we not be stabbed when we're in the martial world without reason? Emo Tianji clasped his hands behind his back and secretly raised his thumb. Boss's words were too good. This was clearly the rhythm of tricking people to death. Chapter 26-24. Cloud Master's clone frowned, seeing that the other party's lineup was really not ordinary. And they also seemed to be really aggrieved and angry. He couldn't help but suppress his anger. He said, Okay, I was wrong just now. What direction do you want to ask? Tell me. If I know, I'll definitely tell you in detail. If you don't, then I'm sorry. Chu Yang laughed heartily and said, I just want to ask how to get to Southern Heaven Forest. I heard that a great battle of the century has erupted there. We rushed all the way here just to watch this great battle. There was still some movement just now, but it's all quiet now. Now that we're here, we have no goal at all. We don't know where to go. Cloud Master's clone instantly heaved a sigh of relief. He pointed casually and said, It's over there. Go ahead. Then he turned and was about to leave. Wait. Chu Yang stopped him and said sincerely, Thank you for showing me the way, friend. I see that you seem to have injuries on your body. I have a pill here. Can you see if it can help you a little? This is also a small token of my sincerity. Thank you. Cloud Master's clone wanted to refuse at first, but just as he was about to speak, he saw the item in Chu Yang's hand and was instantly tempted. The pill in Chu Yang's hand emitted a strange fragrance. The pill halo was dense and colorful. It was actually the first time in his life that he had seen such a miraculous pill. Such a pill definitely had the power of creation. It would be a waste if he didn't take it. Moreover, the other party was so sincere. If he didn't take it, wouldn't he be letting himself down? He hesitated and said, This pill is very valuable. This isn't good, is it? Chu Yang's face was full of sincerity. Meeting in the martial world is fate. Take it. It's really just a token of my sincerity. We're friends. As he spoke, he extended his hand forward. In his palm, the fragrance of the heavy pill became even stronger. As the pill fragrance circulated, it became even more captivating. Then thank you. Cloud Master's clone hesitated, but he still extended his hand in the end. He went to Chu Yang's palm to take the heavy pill. You're welcome. Chu Yang laughed heartily. We're all brothers in the world. Cloud Master's clone's fingertips had already touched the heavy pill. He sighed with emotion. I really didn't expect this. I can't believe there's still such an idiot in the martial world of Heaven Imperial Court. He actually gave away such a rare medicinal pill so casually, just to point out a path for others. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his palm. Just as an unforeseen event occurred, he hastily retreated, but it was too late. One of his arms, along with half of his shoulder, had completely lost its vitality and life force in an instant and turned into ashes. As for the pill in the other party's hand that was emitting endless temptation, it had unknowingly turned into an incomparably sharp long sword. At this moment, there were still traces of blood slowly flowing down the blade. Without a doubt. Obviously, this was a trap. The sage's clone immediately came to a realization. But it was too late for him to realize this. Mo Tianji's purple jade flute, Mo Qingwu's dreaming of a gentle dance saber, GMO and Luo Kadi's swords, Rui Budong's short sword and Nirvana flame, and Sacrificial Maiden's wolf fangs, all attacked at the same time. It was almost at the same time as Chu Yang's sword. The Cloud Master's clone only had time to roar and spin half around desperately. His body was already viciously slashed by these weapons. He was completely caught off guard. It was completely out of his expectations. No matter what, he would never have thought that such a group of people he casually met was actually the king of hell, who wanted his life. And every one of them was so strong. They were all smiles, trying to curry favor with him. And before they even turned around, they slashed. What kind of people were these? The Cloud Master's clone screamed. You! Who exactly are you people? The intense pain was already about to drown his consciousness. His bodily functions were actually continuously losing his vitality. This kind of fear made him go crazy. And that kind of depression, that he didn't know what was going on. Us? Of course, we're the ones who want your life. Chu Yang's body first turned into a series of afterimages. His calamity sword pierced into the heart of the sage's clone with incomparable precision. He said coldly, "This is the second Cloud Master's clone that we've destroyed." The Cloud Master's clone trembled violently, not only because of pain, but also because of fear. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that with his powerful cultivation as a peak-level saint, he wouldn't even have a chance to retaliate against this group of people of unknown origins. He would be killed so easily. The calamity sword pierced into his heart and devoured him in the craziest and most extreme way. It devoured his body at a speed visible to the naked eye. His body was gradually shriveling, and his vitality was rapidly draining away. He roared crazily, and even wanted to self-destruct. However, the calamity sword actually devoured all the power of self-destruction. He wanted to struggle, but none of the calamity brothers around him was inferior to him in terms of strength. They had long worked together to eliminate all his resistance. Mo Tianji, GMO, Luo Kadi, and Rui Budong each used all their strength to clamp down on his limbs, and even his body. Their weapons were already stuck in his body. Due to the intense struggle, they suffered backlash. However, everyone didn't care at all, and focused on restraining him. Mo Qingwu's Qingwu Dream Saber kept slashing down. Chu Luer's Medicine King, Ho, kept striking like lightning. All the attacks and restraints were carried out at the same time. However, they also knew their limits. They definitely wouldn't let his body really split open. Once it split open, this kind of injury that would definitely kill an ordinary person would be equivalent to creating a clone to escape for such a peak-level expert. At such a time, any bit of unnecessary risk would be superfluous and unnecessary. The calamity sword suddenly let out a clear cry, and the sword light suddenly flickered. The face of the saint's clone darkened as if it was dead. Then his entire body made cracking sounds. Chu Yang's eyes flickered, and he focused even more. He was ready for battle. Finally, with a poof, the body of the saint's clone completely turned into a pile of powder and scattered in everyone's hands. However, a thin black light suddenly flew up. Chu Yang was already prepared for this. The calamity sword once again performed the "so what if I slaughter the whole world" move. A majestic sword aura like a long dragon instantly split that black light into thousands of pieces. Then another calamity sword move. Iron wall and copper wall battle never ends. Once this move was used, It immediately enveloped and sealed the entire space. The glaring cold sword light was completely white at this moment. It shone fiercely and continuously flickered as it slashed down. Finally, the spots of black light completely lost their ability to move and quietly floated in midair. The calamity sword laid across the air and once again released a huge suction force. The spots of black light were attracted over without any ability to resist. They were completely digested and devoured by the calamity sword. This was the true spirit that truly belonged to the saint. Only by destroying this bit of true spirit could the true body of the sage be considered to have been destroyed. At this point, everyone could finally heave a sigh of relief. Mo Tianji let out a long sigh. Then he revealed a smile on his face. I was lucky. This encounter was too coincidental. It was truly a coincidence. I never thought that we would be able to get rid of a saint's clone so easily. GMO and Luo Kudi were also very excited, as if they hadn't had enough. To be able to destroy a clone of the saint without paying any price at all. This was simply a huge victory. Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, although we were lucky this time, everyone should be able to see that the strength of our brothers has finally improved after the battle at the extreme heavens. What's even more worth celebrating is that GMO and Luo Kudi have also caught up. This is what everyone should be happy about. Everyone nodded. Back then, it was also because of a clone of the Cloud Lord that everyone was almost wiped out. And this time, even if it was a sneak attack, even if the opponent's mind was in a mess, and he wasn't in a good state, everyone could feel that everyone's strength had made a miraculous leap. Because against such an expert, if one's own cultivation level hadn't reached a certain level, even a sneak attack would be useless. But with everyone's combined strength, they were able to get rid of him so easily. If this was an improvement, what was? When GMO and Luo Kudi heard Chu Yang's praise, they couldn't help but laugh. Really? I just realized that I can completely keep up with the rhythm. This feeling is really too satisfying, ha ha ha. Really? Chu Yang and Mo Tianji nodded solemnly in agreement at the same time. GMO and Luo Kudi laughed. But as they laughed, the rims of their eyes gradually turned red. The two of them laughed and hugged each other, burying their heads in each other's shoulders. Their laughter rang out continuously, but only the two of them could feel that the other's tears had actually soaked the clothes on their shoulders. For so many years, the two of them had always been lagging behind their brothers, always worried that they would fall behind and drag their brothers down. That feeling was really unbearable to recall. Now that worry had finally disappeared completely. We've really caught up. We can really ride side by side with our brothers and advance together. The bitterness of this moment made the two of them almost want to hug each other and cry. Chu Yang sighed. He took a step forward and hugged his two brothers in his arms. He didn't say anything. Then Rui Butong and Mo Tianji also hugged him without saying a word. The scene of 5 grown men hugging each other was originally very strange. But when Tai Butian and the others saw this, they felt touched and sad. They knew very well what kind of effort GMO and Luo Kudi had put in to not fall behind. They also knew very well what kind of sacrifices Chu Yang and the others had made for their brothers, quietly waiting. Even if I can break through, I'll suppress it. When I can become stronger, I'll delay it, just so that I won't be so far away. Don't let my brother feel that I'm far away from him. That's all. Chapter 26-25. Now, everything had finally been completed. Everyone's hard work had paid off. There was no need to say anything. Everything was in silence. All right, now that everyone's done well, let's go to the southern forest immediately. Chu Yang finally raised his head. The 5 brothers looked at each other and smiled. There were traces of tears on everyone's face. Immediately, they started to tease each other again. Ha ha ha, this good for nothing. He actually cried just now and peed like a cat. You're talking about yourself, right? Humph. The tears on my body were obviously caused by you. Ha ha ha. Everyone chased after each other towards the southern heaven forest amidst the sounds of fighting and quarreling. In the temporary stronghold of the Saint Palace, the saint was having a discussion with the arrow god and the others. Unlike the first time when the conversation was completely dominated by the saint, the arrow god had obviously come prepared this time. Beside him, there were 3 other people accompanying him. These 3 people were the 3 elven gods. They were also the other 3 elven gods that the world knew of. In other words, this meeting was unprecedented. The 4 elven gods came together and appeared at the same time. The saint smiled and looked at the 4 of them. He said softly, "Why, Your Excellency Dark God still didn't come this time? I've been friends with the Dark God for a long time, but I've never had the chance to meet him. What a pity." This sentence was sarcastic. At the same time, it reminded him that he knew the truth about them. The arrow god smiled lightly. "Actually, if Your Majesty hadn't emphasized again and again, I'm afraid that even the 4 of us wouldn't have come together this time." The arrow god wasn't exaggerating. Since time immemorial, the elven race had never sent out any of the 4 elven gods for external affairs. This already represented the seriousness of the matter and the importance of it. They rarely sent out more than 2 of the 4 elven gods, but today they sent all 4 elven gods. They really took this meeting very seriously, and couldn't be any more serious. And they were also very vigilant. The saint's eyes became especially sharp. "Your Excellency Arrow God, today, you've regained the Elven Emperor's seal. There's only a fine line between you and the Elven Emperor. Why don't you put in more effort?" The arrow god sneered. "Not necessarily. The Elven Emperor's seal of our race. Is it really with Shuelehan?" The sage's complexion became solemn. "I understand your distinguished archer god's way of thinking very well. As a fellow martial artist, I deeply understand that after battling with an opponent of the same rank, both sides will be evenly matched. He had met a great talent. Especially since the other party is so open and aboveboard, it's completely understandable that you feel a sense of mutual appreciation. If it were me, I would do the same." However, the elf race has always been far away from the heavenly imperial court. They have been fighting for a long time, so they have very little information about the current experts. Let's not talk about others but Donghuang Shuelehan. What kind of cultivation did he have? What kind of cultivation did he have? What status, what background? The sage raised his head and arrogantly looked at the 4 people in front of him. "Do Your Excellencies really know what I've mentioned?" The 4 elves were at a loss for words. They were speechless. The elf race had always stood aloof from worldly affairs and was self-sufficient. However, the other meaning of self-sufficiency was that they were ill-informed and ignorant of everything in the outside world. Naturally, they did not know about Shuelehan's information. This was something that could not be helped. Given the status of the 4 elven gods, there was no way they would argue in such a situation and embarrass themselves for no reason. If they knew, they would not be ill-informed during the final battle and suffer such a huge loss. Do you know how many secrets there were behind Shuelehan becoming the East Emperor back then? Do you really think that a poor person like him can achieve meteoric success and become the East Emperor just by relying on his big fists? The sage sneered. Do you know how many powerful forces were behind Shuelehan for him to be able to shake the world back then? How did they create momentum for him to become famous? Do you know all these? The arrow god muttered in his heart. Which celestial emperor didn't do this when he ascended to that position? Is this very strange? But I can't deny that I really don't know all these. Do you know how many schemes were behind the East Emperor to become the number 1 person after DE? How could he make the others after DE willingly submit to him? The descendants of DE are all outstanding people of the current era. Which one of them is easy to deal with? Which one of them is not proud and arrogant? Which one of them is not tough and domineering? But why did they all submit in the end? Admit that Shuelehan is the number 1? I believe you also don't know how many schemes were involved when Shuelehan became friends with Zihao back then. With the sworn brother of the 2nd person in the world, and the master of a celestial emperor himself. With such powerful support, why did Zihao still die after such a long period of time? Why did Zihao rather die in battle than break out? What was the purpose of hoping for a chance to make a comeback in the future? Of course you don't know. Back then when the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor died in battle, and the entire Purple Cloud Heavens fell, how many conditions were involved in the exchange of benefits? And you can't even imagine how much of the exchange conditions Shuelehan had. What benefits were involved in this? And how much of these benefits did Shui Leihan take for himself? As the sage of the heavenly imperial court, I am in charge of the world. It can be said that the heavenly imperial court is mine, and the purple cloud heavens is also my territory. But why was I unable to send out troops back then? Why was I even criticized and framed for this? They said that I was guilty and didn't help when I was in danger. Do you really think that this is just a simple rumor in the pugilistic world? That such a rumor can destroy my reputation as a sage to such an extent? That I would be condemned by everyone and bear infamy for 1,000,000 years? What kind of irresistible force is behind this, that is pushing this process forward? Do you all know? In these millions of years, too many strange things have happened. How could there be no reason? Long before the aristocratic queen met with her misfortune, why did the demon emperor, as the #1 expert of the demon race, lose when the demon race fought for the demon emperor heavens? There was a mastermind behind this. The reason for this is extremely simple. It's just that the demon emperor had the strength and power to compete for the #1 position in the heavenly imperial court. And he also had a peerless demon empress. Do you all know that on the surface, Shui Leihan only had one empress, and she died at a young age? Ever since then, the East Emperor didn't get close to women and focused on managing the affairs of the Eastern royal heavens, which was praised by everyone. But you all will never know how many wives Shui Leihan actually had in secret? How many confidants did he have? How many people in the heavenly imperial court endured humiliation and still kept women and children for their enemy, even after being cuckolded? It's even harder for you to imagine how many descendants Shui Leihan had. Countless. Now, do you all know how many things you don't know? The saint looked at the 4 fairy gods in disdain. The fairy race has been isolated from the world for too long. You all don't know anything at all. Just for a mere battle, you gave up your principles and forgot about your hatred. Should I praise the purity of the fairy race experts, or laugh at your stupidity? Do you all know that there are so many heavenly armament pavilions in the heavenly imperial court, and the oldest person in charge is only in his early 20s? The saint sneered. Archer god, can you do what they are doing now when you were their age? If there was one, it could be explained away as a genius. But everyone is like this. Don't you think it's suspicious? They are all young people in their 20s, but they are unstoppable in the heavenly imperial court. Step by step, they have a meteoric rise. The scale of the development of the heavenly armament pavilion is like bamboo shoots after the rain, like a flash flood, without extremely huge financial and material support. Even if you are the archer god, can you achieve half of this achievement? Do you all know that the power of the heavenly armament pavilion is about to occupy the entire heavenly imperial court? Do you all know where the heavenly armament pavilion came from, and how it could rise so quickly? If those children of the heavenly armament pavilion really took over this continent, do you all know what kind of consequences it would cause? How can you be so sure that the heavenly armament pavilion will cause less trouble than the extraterrestrial demons if they take over the continent? Where did you all get such confidence from? Who gave it to you? You all don't understand the reality of the situation at all. The other party only used a few words to sow discord, and you all were provoked to turn around and make things difficult for me, even questioning me face to face. The saint sneered. Putting everything else aside, why didn't Shui Leihan and the demon empress, the 2 great experts, do anything about the massacre of the 10,000 saints celestial spirits today? Do you all really think that only the mountain river sword can destroy the 10,000 saints celestial spirits? The Grand Orient sword and the Demon King's hook are also rare divine weapons. Can't they destroy the 10,000 saints celestial spirits? The saint sneered. That's a complete joke. As the fairy race, you all are naturally kind and pure. You always think of others in a positive light. I don't blame you for that. I'm also not surprised that you all were deceived by others, because this is your greatest strength, and also one of the reasons why I value you all the most. Because the imperial court is in danger, and I urgently need allies like the fairy race, even more than before. What you don't know, don't understand, and don't understand, I'm willing to explain it to you, and let you all understand it clearly. The saint said firmly. But the only thing I find strange is, Why didn't you all wait for the truth to be revealed before coming to find trouble with me? Why did you have to make the 4 fairy gods move out at the same time to face me in this situation where right and wrong are unclear? Have you all already confirmed that I'm the one you want to eliminate? Or do you fairies really think that I, Cloud Master, as the only saint who has ruled the imperial court for 2 million years, can actually deceive you all without any integrity? You'd rather believe in Xue Leihan's words than believe in my sincere words. You all can't wait any longer? Could it be that only Xue Leihan is worthy of your trust, and I, Cloud Master, am not? Then why isn't Xue Leihan the saint? If he had such great prestige, why would the Saint Monarch be my Cloud Lord instead? Chapter 26-26. I told you about the final resting place of the Elven Empress, and the current location of the Elven Emperor's seal. What did Xue Leihan tell you? A few specious questions and a few guesses? You and Xue Leihan just fought a battle, and you're already appreciating each other? Just because you're a hero? You're a hero, so he has to be a hero too? The saint sneered coldly. Your Excellency Archer God, if that's the case, I can also fight with you. Furthermore, I can guarantee that I can make you suffer a crushing defeat, and admit defeat wholeheartedly. It will be even more devastating than the battle between you and Xue Leihan. Even more so. I'm a man of my word. Do you believe me on this? The saint laughed coldly, his face full of mockery and ridicule. He didn't show any mercy in his words. This long speech was basically pointing at the 4 elven gods and scolding them. But the 4 elven gods couldn't refute him at all. Yes, what proof do you have? None. What doubts do you have? You shouldn't. Just as the saint said, why do you trust Xue Leihan so much? Why don't you trust me? And why? Xue Leihan is the East Emperor, and I'm the saint. If I fought with Xue Leihan just for you and lost, then I can also fight with you, and make you suffer an even more thorough defeat that will make you even more convinced. What's the big deal about that? It's very easy. The elven god of archery didn't doubt that the saint had the ability to defeat him. Even the East Emperor had hidden his strength and defeated him with his real strength. The saint, whose reputation was above the East Emperor, must be even more powerful. Just the saint's shocking cultivation level of being able to slaughter countless divine true spirits in a very short period of time was enough. The elven god of archery had to admit that he wasn't as good as the saint. The saint was right. But why? On what basis? Judging whether someone was good or bad based on just one battle. It was indeed too childish. The 4 elven gods were all top experts, but at this moment, they were also very confused. Who was the one who was telling the truth? What exactly was the truth? So, please tell us, how can we find out the truth? The one who spoke was another king of the elven race, the god of power. That's right. What you're talking about is something that happened a long time ago. Even if we wanted to investigate, we wouldn't be able to. The god of archery took a deep breath. But what we need to do now is to find the crux of the problem. We just need to know the truth. Nothing else matters. There had to be a truth behind everything, as long as the truth was revealed. The truth came to light. Who is right and who is wrong will be clear at a glance. Who is more trustworthy will be known by then. And on this point, I hope that the holy sage will not be stingy with his guidance. The 4 elven gods bowed together. You finally brought the topic back to the main point. The sage's face stiffened, and he deeply sighed. This matter can't be sorted out with words. It was unclear, but there was a key that led to the truth. However, this is a matter of great importance. It depends on whether you have the guts to do it or not. May I ask what kind of hub it is? The 4 deities asked together. At this moment, the expressions of the 4 elves became extremely tense. His words had finally come to a point. Perhaps in the next moment, all the truth would be revealed. There are 3 paths to the truth. You can choose. The sage stretched out 3 fingers. He said softly, there are 3 paths to choose from. The 4 deities were shocked. Yes, there are 3 paths. One of them is Xue Leihan. The other one is the Demon Empress and Yao Xaner. The sage smiled and looked at the 4 of them provocatively. As expected, the 4 deities' faces darkened. For a moment no one spoke. Indeed, The problem had returned to the original point. When the sage first found the elven race, he pointed the spearhead at the Eastern Emperor Demon Empress, because of the Elven Empress and the Elven Emperor's seal. Now his target was still these two people. What was the difference from before? Perhaps the only difference was that he was forcing the Elven race to be officially hostile to the Eastern Emperor Demon Empress. Seeing that the four elven deities didn't speak, the sage was obviously a little disappointed. I've told the archer god before that the Elven Empress fell because of this adulterous couple. The Empress was killed by Xue Leihan himself. This is the result of my investigation. I can't force you to believe it or not. You've also said that it was a long time ago, and it's hard to find any evidence. However, there's another piece of evidence on Xue Leihan. The Elven Emperor's seal. The Elven Emperor's seal? The four elven deities were shocked. Regarding the death of the Elven Empress and the blood feud, the elven race naturally wouldn't let it go. However, the Elven Emperor's seal was of great importance. No clue or opportunity could be missed. Yes, the Elven Emperor's seal is in Xue Leihan's hands. If you can find the seal in Xue Leihan's hands, it'll be the best evidence, and the truth will be revealed. On the other hand, if Xue Leihan doesn't have the Elven Emperor's seal, it'll be my slander. As a man of character, there's nothing he can't tell others. The sage said righteously. Since the sage has said so, we're half convinced. This method is indeed feasible. But the Eastern Emperor's strength is unfathomable. Could it be that the four of you aren't confident in dealing with Xue Leihan? Even if the four of you aren't strong enough, don't you still have the dark deity to help you? The sage said. The archer god recalled his battle and said, there's still a doubt about this. Even if we really go against the Eastern Emperor, we'll still focus on capturing him. However, I've already understood his strength from the battle. If Xue Leihan intends to escape unscathed, even if we attack together with the dark deity, we might not be able to hold him back, let alone capture him. Then what if the target is the Demon Empress? As long as the Demon Empress is in our hands, the Eastern Emperor can exchange the Elven Emperor's seal. The result will be the same. The sage asked. That's also impossible. The archer god smiled bitterly. The Demon Empress and the Eastern Emperor's strength are at most one level apart. If we can't deal with the Eastern Emperor, the result will be about the same if we deal with the Demon Empress. Not to mention the fact that they have 7-star guards protecting them and have the fortune of heaven and earth on them. It's impossible for us to capture either of them. Especially after Wuxia's defeat, we really don't have the face to attack him again. The archer god and his 3 brothers smiled bitterly at each other. To be honest, they didn't want to say that either. Saying that would be showing weakness. However, what was even more undeniable was that they felt a lot more relaxed about not having a direct battle with Xue Leihan after showing their stance. Thinking of the elegant Eastern Emperor, that pair of eyes that seemed to be able to see through the heavens and see through the world, the archer god had an impulse to not be enemies with him. Indeed, the Eastern Emperor and the Demon Empress can't be captured easily. The sage's eyes narrowed slightly. If he could, he really wanted to kill these 4 elves with his palms right now. However, he could only go along with them now, because once the negotiation fell apart, the situation would only be worse for him. Fortunately, we still have a choice, and that's the last option. The sage took a deep breath, and his expression was serious. That person is Chu Yang. As long as we have him, we can also force the Eastern Emperor to hand over the Fairy Emperor's seal. The 4 of you may not be confident in dealing with the Eastern Emperor and the Demon Empress, but you should be confident in dealing with this junior, right? Of course, the sage wouldn't tell the 4 elven gods that the strength of this junior, Chu Yang, was simply unimaginable. He was almost on par with Donghuang Xue Leihan, and might even be above him. How could the 4 elven gods, who didn't even have the confidence to deal with the Eastern Emperor and the Demon Empress, possibly deal with a certain king of hell? In fact, compared to Xue Leihan and the Demon Empress, the person that the sage wanted to get rid of more now was Chu Yang. Minister Chu. The pressure that this person brought to the sage actually far exceeded that of the Eastern Emperor and the Demon Empress. Apart from being ridiculously strong, he was also the common boss of Gu Duxing, Dong Wuxiang, Xie Danxiong, Ao Xian, and all the members of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. What did this mean? What did this mean? Different from the ignorance of the elves, the sage's heart was very clear. This directly proved one thing. As long as Chu Yang was willing, a single word from him could set off an unprecedented storm in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Although the sage himself didn't want to admit this fact, he couldn't deny that Chu Yang had already reached such a pivotal position without him being aware of it. His three brothers had already become newly ascended celestial emperors. As for Gu Duxing of the Big Western Sky, after he left, Wu Yekwang definitely wouldn't be his match. In addition, there was the Demon Emperor Heaven, where the Heavenly Armament Pavilion's headquarters was located, and the Eastern Emperor Heaven, which had a close relationship with the Demon Emperor Heaven. Plus Chu Yang was already equivalent to grasping the power of this world. What kind of concept was the combined power of this world? Just thinking about it made the sage shudder. Or it could be said that the power that Chu Yang could now unleash was even greater than the sage's. Even more terrifying. And this kind of terror, Shui Leihan and Demon Exiner hadn't caused such pressure to the sage in these millions of years. Perhaps only the Zihao of those years could give the sage such pressure. But even the Zihao of those years couldn't compare to the current Chu Yang. Therefore, Chu Yang was the person that the sage's heart wanted to get rid of the most urgently. Number 1, irreplaceable. With Chu Yang around, the sage couldn't sleep or eat, as if there was a thorn in his back. As long as the 4 elven gods or 5 elven gods schemed against Chu Yang, no matter who lived or died, it wouldn't matter. The result would definitely be an all-out war between the elves and the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. This result was the one that the sage wanted the most, and also the one that he was most happy to see. Chu Yang. The 4 elven gods all spat out this name at the same time. Their expressions were all different. That illegitimate son of the Eastern Sovereign and the Demon Empress? The arrow god frowned. Yes, it's him. The sage said indifferently. This is also one of the effective ways to solve this problem. As long as we capture Chu Yang, or even kill him, everything will come to light. Chapter 26-27. At that time, as long as we have Chu Yang in our hands, even if it's just a corpse, we can make the East Emperor Demon Empress submit. The whereabouts of the Fairy Emperor's seal will be immediately known. As for the revenge of the Empress, it will naturally be clear. At least half of this ancient mystery can be solved. The saint squinted his eyes and smiled faintly. With Chu Yang in our hands, regardless of whether he's dead or alive, the East Emperor Demon Empress will be at a loss. The arrangements made by the East Emperor and the Demon Empress all these years will all be for naught. I believe that no one will be able to remain clear-headed after such a serious blow. At that time, as long as we use some tricks, everything will be clear. And this direction may be the last chance for the fairy race to take revenge, and also the last chance to rise up. It's also the last effective entry point. The saint finally finished. He slowly exhaled and said, "Of course, if you're still worried about your relationship with Shui Leihan and your own identity, and are unwilling to take action against a junior, then I won't force you. After all, this is an important matter for your race. As for my side, even without the help of the fairy race," the saint stood up, with a soaring arrogance, and said lightly, "I'm still the Saint Majesty who rules the Heavenly Imperial Court. This is something that no one can change in the past. It won't change now, and it won't change in the future." The arrow god and the others looked at each other. The saint naturally had his reasons for what he said. For so many years, no one could shake his position. Perhaps he really didn't have to worry. However, the whereabouts of the Fairy Emperor's seal was related to the future survival of the fairy race. The saint could ignore it, but could they really ignore it? Since that's the case, then, we'll be responsible for capturing Chu Yang alive. When the arrow god said this, he almost used up all his strength. Even his tone had a hint of shame. No matter what, he was still someone of the same level as Shui Leihan. Now he had to gather the strength of several people to deal with Shui Leihan's illegitimate son. Deal with a junior. This inevitably felt like bullying the weak. It was an unfair victory. More importantly, it was also a little unfair. If they had any grievances, they could just look for Xue Leihan directly. What was the point of bullying a child? However, things had already reached this stage. Other than this, there was no other breakthrough point for the fairy race's future. Even if it went against his conscience, even if it was despicable, he had no choice but to do it this once. At this moment, the 4 elven gods all felt rather embarrassed. He was embarrassed, but he was still struggling and hesitating about the immorality of doing this. They shouldn't have done it, but they didn't consider that even if they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to do it. What if he couldn't do it? What would the consequences be? The 4 of you, I still have to remind you, the sage said solemnly. This Chu Yang is a genius that the Eastern Emperor Demon Empress painstakingly taught. His strength is no small matter, and you must not underestimate him. Otherwise, you will surely suffer a great loss. Since the 4 of them had already agreed, the sage had to emphasize Chu Yang's strength. If these 4 fellows underestimated each other and made a mistake, then they would be done for. The 4 elven gods smiled bitterly. No matter how powerful that little guy is, he's still too weak. He can't possibly surpass Xue Leihan, right? There are no absolutes in this world. The sage let out a long sigh and said, Chu Yang, this person, he has always been unfathomable. At such a young age, he is already a top expert. Furthermore, he has never shown his true strength. His strength has always been a mystery. Even I, every time I mention this person, I also. Just as the sage said this, his complexion abruptly changed. Immediately, his entire face turned pale. In a moment of absent-mindedness, he spat out a mouthful of blood. With a smack, that mouthful of blood landed on the ground and actually shot a deep hole in the ground. As the sage spat out blood, his body actually became unstable. He swayed violently before he managed to stand firm. The sage knew that things were not good. He didn't dare to be negligent, and immediately closed his eyes to regulate his breathing. His expression was really as ugly as a dead person's. Another doppelganger had died. The sage immediately realized it. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to be in this state all of a sudden. At this moment, the hatred in the sage's heart had already reached the point where it was about to explode. He clearly felt that he had gone through untold hardships, used all means, and suffered all kinds of humiliation to allow his doppelganger to escape. However, for some reason, it was killed halfway through. This was simply an unbearable blow, especially since this time, it was even more serious than the previous time. Not even the slightest bit of his true spirit had returned. He had completely and thoroughly lost contact with it. This meant that his divine spirit had already been completely destroyed by someone. The sage's heart felt as if it was being twisted by a knife. It was unbearable, but it was also really painful to the point where it was better to die than to live. However, at this moment, he still didn't dare to do anything. He was only afraid that these 4 would see through his flaws. He could only immediately circulate his energy to calm himself down and stabilize his mind. Otherwise, he was afraid that even his own body's cultivation would be affected. Therefore, he really didn't dare to say another word. Upon seeing this, the 4 elven gods were all overwhelmed with shock. At this moment, there was a feeling that their souls had almost left their bodies. The shock was, of course, that the sage had suddenly spat out blood. This number 1 person in the imperial court had spat out blood without any warning or reason. However, what was even more shocking to the 4 elven gods was that, before the sage had spat out blood, he had just said such a sentence. This person, Chu Yang, has always been unfathomable. At such a young age, he's already a peak expert. Moreover, he has never shown his true strength. What his true strength is has always been a mystery. Even I, every time I mention this person also. Before he could finish this sentence, he had already spat out blood. What did this mean? At the same time, the 4 elven gods had an unimaginable and inconceivable thought. Did this mean that, even the sage, the number 1 person in the imperial court, would immediately spit out blood every time he mentioned Chu Yang's name? Fuck. The 4 elven gods only felt their hair stand on end. All the hair on their bodies stood on end. This was too frightening. It was only mentioning his name. But even the sage, who was widely acknowledged as the #1 person in the world, would spit out blood from the backlash. This was simply unimaginable. What exactly was this Chu Yang's cultivation? What kind of person was he? For a moment, the four of them looked at the sage with some lingering fear and anger. Sage, you're a fucking bastard. You actually want us to capture such a terrifying person? You might as well send us to our deaths. Because if we went to deal with the East Emperor Demon Empress, we wouldn't be in danger if she escaped. However, the person we're targeting now is a terrifying person who can make a peak expert like the sage spit out blood just by mentioning his name. Isn't this person's cultivation already at a level that we've never dreamed of before? It was truly unimaginable what kind of terrifying cultivation this was. Master Yin, you're fucking tricking us, right? For a moment, the four of them actually had the same thought. All they could think of was this. There was really no way to not be suspicious. After circulating his energy for a moment, the sage, whose body and mind had recovered slightly, almost couldn't help but spit out blood again. Because when he saw their expressions, he knew that they must have misunderstood. However, this really couldn't be avoided. It seemed that this unforeseen event had come too coincidentally. They had just mentioned Chu Yang's name, and it was such a sentence. And he had spat out blood just at the right time. It was so coincidental that the sage wanted to spit out another mouthful of blood just thinking about it. Just because of that one look, the blood in his chest surged again, and he almost couldn't suppress it. The pain in his body, mind, and divine soul had reached a level where he would rather die than live. However, this misunderstanding had to be resolved no matter what. Otherwise, how would these four elves dare to deal with Chu Yang? How would the follow-up plan be carried out? The sage endured it, took a deep breath, and said in a low voice, "The four of you don't have to worry. My current injuries have nothing to do with that Chu Yang. It's just that when I was dealing with the myriad saints' true spirit, just now, my vital energy went astray, and I suffered some internal injuries. In addition, my old injuries haven't healed yet. That's why I'm like this." The four elven gods were stunned. "We didn't see you injured." The elven archer god was at the scene at that time. When the sage went on a killing spree, he didn't encounter any capable experts at all. The only three powerful ones were killed by the Eastern Emperor, the Demon Empress, and himself. If he could still get injured in that situation, and such serious injuries at that, it could only mean one thing. The sage was nothing more than this. He didn't live up to his title as the #1 in the imperial court. This really has nothing to do with that Chu Yang. The sage smiled bitterly. If Chu Yang had really reached the point where I would spit out blood at the mention of his name, no matter how conceited I am, I would have surrendered long ago. Look, when I mentioned Chu Yang, I didn't spit out blood, did I? How can there be an expert who can injure people at the mention of his name in this world? It's a fantasy. The sage explained with difficulty. The four elven gods expressed their agreement, but they were still criticizing in their hearts. Indeed, we haven't heard of such an expert, not even a legend. It's just that, with your current state, it's not as good as spitting out blood. The sage endured the monstrous pain, and spoke until his mouth was dry. Finally, he explained clearly. This made the four elven gods determined to find trouble with Chu Yang. At this point, the sage finally heaved a sigh of relief. The four elven gods were also helpless in this matter. This matter concerned the rise and fall of the elven race. They would rather kill the wrong person than miss this opportunity. No matter how awesome Chu Yang was, they had to give it a try. Otherwise, how could they watch the elven race be destroyed? With the plan settled, the four elven gods took their leave. Looking at the four elven gods walking out, the sage held on for a while, but still couldn't hold it in. He opened his mouth and spat out a lot of blood. Chapter 26-28. This was something that could not be helped. No matter how profound his cultivation was, the sudden loss and destruction of his spirit was no small matter. Moreover, he had already killed all the 10,000 saints' true spirit bases here. Otherwise, he could have gained some nutrients and greatly reduced the time needed to recuperate. But now, he could not say anything. Helpless, the saint could only consume the treasures in his hands. But his heart was filled with endless fear and anger. Who exactly killed another one of my doppelgangers? How would he know that the main culprit who killed another one of his doppelgangers was the person he had just declared to have nothing to do with his injuries? Chu Yang. When Chu Yang and the rest arrived at the Southern Sky Forest, everything had already ended. Most of the people who had gathered here had already left in 2s and 3s. Most of those who remained here were cultivators with relatively low cultivation bases. They were rummaging through the ruins in 2s and 3s, hoping to find something valuable. Dong Huang Qianghua and the rest could not have cleaned up so thoroughly. When Xie Danqiong entered, he had indeed only taken the best quality items. In such a huge 10,000 saints true spirit base, even the best quality items were already a shocking amount. Xie Danqiong was not like Chu Yang, who had the tribulation space and could store as many items as he wanted. The remaining items were of relatively ordinary value. Xie Danqiong was not interested in them. The other peak experts were also in the same situation, so everyone left. But for martial artists below the saint level, the items left here were still very valuable. So, everyone rushed in to search for treasures. It seemed that they had really gained a lot. Looking at the scene in front of him, Chu Yang was truly puzzled. Isn't this the location of the battle between Dong Huang and the Arrow God? Why has it become the base for the destruction of the 10,000 saints' true spirit? No. Right now this place is basically a bustling city. What's going on here? After asking a few questions, he finally understood. It turned out that the battle between Dong Huang and the Arrow God had actually caused the entire Southern Sky Forest to be uprooted. That was fine. The problem was that there just so happened to be a 10,000 saints true spirit base under the ground. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? Even a novel would not dare to write such a thing, right? It was so coincidental that it made one's hair stand on end. Even Chu Yang and Mo Tianji, when they first heard about this matter, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded, flabbergasted, and dumbstruck. No wonder. No wonder they met a Saint Monarch's doppelganger on the way here. And it was a Saint Monarch's doppelganger that was running for his life. It seems like the traces of the myriad holiness true spirit were suddenly discovered here. And the Holy Monarch happened to be here. Demon Empress Demon's doppelganger, and Saint Monarch's here. With so many people watching the battle. So Saint Monarch Saint Saint Monarch. Saint 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 Saint. So he had no choice but to do it himself. Kill everyone here, and do it as fast as possible. Don't leave anyone alive. This way, even the 3 magicians will die in this round. However, it was precisely because of the Saint Monarch's intervention that the clone had the opportunity to escape. Moreover, it just so happened to encounter us. This is truly too coincidental. Mo Tianji said. I reckon that the 3 great devil masters guarding this place might not have died in the hands of the saint. They most likely died in the hands of the East Emperor Demon Empress, or other experts. The saint had to make use of them, to create a certain amount of chaos, to create a chance for that clone to escape. That makes sense. I believe that although it's not too far away, it's not too far away either. If that's the case, Sage Monarch's myriad holy true spirit base is now 2 out of 3, and only 1 remains. Chu Yang took a deep breath. A base of this scale, and one that was built in secret. I believe that it would be impossible to build it without hundreds of thousands of years. Yes. Mo Tianji said. So the only hidden danger now is the last 10,000 saints true spirit base that has yet to be found. There are also the 10,000 saints true spirits that have already been scattered out in the martial world over the years. Perhaps this portion is the hardest to find. Chu Yang sighed and said, That's right. These people have already taken root in this world. As long as they don't take the initiative to reveal themselves, no one will know that they are the 10,000 saints true spirits. Even if they die, very few people will be able to tell that something is amiss. This is the 10,000 saints true spirit. This is the most unbearable part. This is indeed the most troublesome part, but there's still the easiest way to solve it. Mo Tianji said. As long as the Saint Monarch can be killed, then the gap will be blocked from the source. After that, even if they are the 10,000 saints true spirits, It's equivalent to being freed. After death, the true spirits will have no place to return to and can naturally enter the cycle of reincarnation, the spring of rebirth. Chu Yang's eyes lit up, and he said, "That's right. As long as the Saint Monarch is killed, everything will be fine." Mo Tianji smiled bitterly. Killing the Saint Monarch is easy to say, but it's easier said than done. He paused and said, "If I'm not wrong, the majority of the top experts in the Saint Emperor Palace are of the 10,000 Saints true spirit type. Or perhaps all of them are. If I were the Saint Monarch, I wouldn't let these people go." Mo Tianji said. "They are so obedient, so loyal, and so easy to manipulate. Wouldn't it be a pity to let them go? Even if the Saint Emperor Palace has as many experts as there are clouds, how many of them would be left after spending more than 1,000,000 years to gather them?" Mo Tianji looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang's face sank. Yes, at the very least, the upper echelons of the Saint Emperor Palace should have been completely wiped out. And this also explains why the Saint Monarch's prestige did not diminish after the defeat of Zi Shaotian, and why no one in the Saint Emperor Palace doubted him. Yes, according to common sense, the incident back then was so tragic. No matter how ruthless the Saint Emperor Palace was, there should be a few loyal people who would step forward bravely. However, the situation back then was really contrary to common sense. The East Emperor once said that when he went to find the Saint Monarch to settle accounts, he was actually besieged. Even after he revealed his identity, the attacks did not stop. Mo Tianji said, "This mystery has been solved." Everyone heaved a long sigh. Solving the mystery for a long time made everyone feel even more depressed. The Saint Emperor Palace was the most sacred and inviolable place in the Heaven Imperial Court. Now it had completely become such a place, filled with 10,000 saints true spirits. What kind of ironic reality was this? "Let's go to the Heavenly Armament Pavilion." Chu Yang and the others flew up and left quickly. Just halfway there, suddenly, there were several extremely powerful auras in front of them. Chu Yang instantly became alert. He waved his hand to signal. The brothers immediately regained their composure and did not look as anxious as before. Almost in the next moment, they saw 4 people rushing over from the opposite side at lightning speed. The 4 of them were extremely handsome. The only difference between them and ordinary people was that they had pointy ears. Chu Yang was not unfamiliar with this kind of appearance. He was used to seeing them in the Heaven Imperial Court. However, there was only one in the Heaven Imperial Court. Here there were 4 of them. These people were all elves. Chu Yang had a good impression of Dukyu. However, he did not have a good impression of the elves in the Heaven Imperial Court. During this period of time, he had cried because of the rumors made by these people. He had become their illegitimate child. No one would feel good if they were in his shoes. Only these 4 elves had a heavy look on their faces. Their expressions were extremely serious. Just looking at them would make one feel depressed. They seemed to have a lot on their minds. Seeing that Chu Yang and the others were right in front of them, the 4 of them were slightly surprised. However, they only took one look and actually took the initiative to open up a path. They flew off from both sides. One of them could faintly be heard saying, "If they are really so powerful, I'm afraid that even if we join forces, we will still be in danger. Don't you think so?" At this point, the 4 of them had already gone more than 10,000 feet away. Nothing could be heard anymore. Chu Yang and the others were greatly shocked. The most conservative estimate of the 4 people who went over just now was that each of them was at the level of DE and Empress D. Even if they couldn't be compared to the Demon Empress of the East Emperor, they definitely wouldn't be inferior to Dong Wuxiang and Luo Kadi's level. Furthermore, there were a few of them working together. This was already a rather tyrannical battle force. Chu Yang reckoned that even if it was him, it would already be very lucky to be able to keep his life when facing these 4 elves. And such a group of experts was actually discussing how to fight against the enemy. Furthermore, it was even if we join forces, we will still be in danger. This sentence was too shocking. With these 4 people working together, even if the Demon Empress Dong Huang encountered them, she would probably avoid them. She would definitely not rashly face them head-on. However, These 4 people actually felt that they would be in danger when they joined forces to deal with someone. Then, who was the person they were going to deal with? Who could be so powerful? Judging from their strength, the target is very likely to be a Saint Monarch, Mo Tianji said. But even if it's really a Saint Monarch, judging from the situation when they fought with the clones previously, they also don't have the ability to make these 4 people feel that they would be in danger. Even if they can't defeat them, it's not a problem for them to retreat unscathed. Yes, the 4 of them working together is almost equivalent to 4 demon empresses or East Emperors. This is not even taking into account the degree of tacit understanding between them. Chu Yang frowned. But who exactly are they talking about? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.